Welcome to AI Otaku Studio. Like, subscribe, and enjoy this video. Chapter 51, Devouring the Heavenly Tribulation, Reforging the Divine Artifact. The extreme north land, the edge of the core circle. The Ice Empress flicked her crystal-clear scorpion tail with some impatience, the diamond-like hooked tip shimmering with a cold light in the dim surroundings. Before her, Huo was fully concentrated, his hands pressing down in the air as his spirit power carefully connected to the Ice Empress's massive body, performing a skill imprint. At that moment, the Ice Empress sensed something and suddenly raised her head, looking toward the sky deep within the core circle. The originally hazy horizon had begun to gather heart-palpitating deep grey clouds at some point. These were no ordinary rain clouds, they were as dark as ink, and as they churned and rolled, purple-red lightning flickered and darted within them like dragons and snakes. An indescribable heavenly pressure was spreading at a terrifying speed, as if the entire firmament of the extreme north land was about to collapse. So soon, a hint of surprise flashed in the Ice Empress's diamond-like eyes, followed by realization. Is the Snow Empress already starting to break through the 800,000-year threshold and triggering the tribulation lightning? This pressure was so vast that even from a great distance, it made her heart race with fear. The 800,000-year tribulation lightning was far more powerful than the 400,000-year tribulation she had experienced before. She couldn't help but recall the scene from over half a year ago when that plane master had effortlessly blocked the tribulation for her. Her heart eased slightly, but she still couldn't help but worry. Withdrawing her gaze, the Ice Empress looked at Huo, who was still working hard on the imprinting, and spoke with a hint of urgency. "Human brat, are you done yet? Stop dawdling." Huo was startled by the sudden reprimand. Fine beads of sweat broke out on his forehead as he hurriedly said, "Right away, senior, it'll be done right away. The last soul skill model is almost finished imprinting." He didn't dare to be the slightest bit negligent, desperately circulating his spirit power with intense mental focus. Finally, after a few breaths, the spirit power around him fluctuated, and two embryonic spirit rings shimmering with blood-red light slowly took shape beneath his feet. Although the light was still somewhat unstable, the imprinting was clearly a success. "It's done," Huo let out a long sigh of relief, his face showing the joy of a heavy burden being lifted. Seeing this, the Ice Empress didn't bother to say more, only giving a cold snort. "Consider yourself lucky. This place is not safe to stay. Under the tribulation lightning, even the aftershocks are more than you can handle. Leave quickly." Before her voice had even faded, her massive scorpion body had already transformed into a streak of jade-green light. Tearing through the wind and snow, she sped toward the core where the tribulation clouds were gathering at an incredible speed, vanishing into the vast blizzard in an instant. Huo didn't dare to linger either. Feeling the increasingly terrifying pressure in the sky, he bowed respectfully toward the direction where the Ice Empress had gone and toward the deeper area where that mysterious plane master might be. Then, he turned and ran toward the outer reaches of the extreme north land. The core of the extreme north, above the Ice Palace. Lei Chen stood with his hands behind his back, suspended in midair. He looked up at the vast tribulation clouds that had completely shrouded the sky above the extreme north land, thick as lead and dancing with electric snakes. The destructive energy contained within the cloud layers caused the laws of this space to tremble slightly. The gale whipped the ice and snow, letting out howls like ghosts and wailing gods. The 800,000-year tribulation lightning is indeed extraordinary. Lei Chen felt the terrifying energy gathering in those tribulation clouds, which had infinitely approached the god rank, and a look of anticipation appeared in his eyes. Inside the Ice Palace below, the Snow Empress's aura had already climbed to its peak. Her 800,000 years of cultivation were released without reservation, echoing the tribulation clouds in the sky as she prepared to face this life-and-death trial. However, with Lei Chen here, the nature of this trial had already changed. Boom crack! The long-brewing first bolt of tribulation, lightning finally tore through the dark clouds. It was a massive purple-red lightning pillar over 10 meters in diameter, like a spear of judgment from a heavenly god, carrying a majestic heavenly power that could annihilate everything as it crashed down toward the Snow Empress. Everywhere it passed, space distorted, leaving behind charred trails. Just as the destructive lightning pillar was about to strike the Ice Palace, Lei Chen moved. He did not take any defensive or offensive stance. He simply raised his right hand calmly. At the tip of his index finger, a tiny, barely perceptible spark of purple-gold electricity which contained the supreme thunder god origin, quietly lit up. In the next moment, that terrifying tribulation lightning, which was enough to kill an ordinary ferocious beast, seemed to be drawn by some irresistible force. It actually veered in midair at a bizarre angle, abandoning its original target, the Snow Empress, and like 100 rivers returning to the sea, it all hammered into Lei Chen's seemingly tiny body. Buzz! A 7-colored halo flashed slightly around Lei Chen's body, and that violent purple-red lightning was like a clay ox entering the sea, instantly sinking into his body without causing the slightest ripple. This pure and majestic power of thunder was being greedily devoured, absorbed, and refined by the thunder god origin at the center of his brow. As expected, the energy level is close to the god rank. The effect is far better than before, Lei Chen thought to himself. He had previously devoured the Snow Empress's 700,000-year tribulation lightning, which had a volume equivalent to a demigod, and the Ice Empress's 400,000-year tribulation lightning, which was equivalent to a limit Douluo. This had already allowed the thunder god origin, which had been dormant for ages, to recover quite a bit of vitality. As long as he completely devoured this tribulation lightning, combined with the accumulation from the previous 2 times, the total amount of thunder god origin power he gathered would officially break through that critical point and reach the level of a complete god rank. This meant that the thunder god divine seat, which had been shattered for an unknown number of eons, would complete its preliminary reconstruction in his hands. And this thunder god origin power, which had reached the god rank level, was precisely the perfect material for refining a thunder god exclusive divine artifact. Thinking of this, the look of anticipation in Lei Chen's eyes grew even stronger. He no longer waited passively and began to actively circulate that ever-growing ball of purple gold, thunder god origin within him, starting its preliminary tempering and shaping to prepare for the subsequent artifact refining. Boom, boom, crack. While Lei Chen was tempering the thunder god origin, the bolts of tribulation lightning in the high sky fell one after another without pause. Each was thicker and more violent than the last, and their color gradually changed from purple-red to deep purple and then dark gold, their power increasing exponentially. But no matter how fierce the tribulation lightning was, the outcome remained the same. Lei Chen always stood suspended in the air like a bottomless pit, drawing all the tribulation lightning aimed at the Snow Empress toward himself to be devoured and absorbed. The purple-gold lightning pattern at the center of his brow became brighter and clearer as the tribulation lightning continuously poured in, even beginning to emit a faint pressure. It was a sign that the authority to command the thunder of heaven and earth was awakening. And the thunder god origin within his body, under the infusion of this massive amount of high-quality thunder power, was like divine iron thrown into a great furnace, constantly being purified and strengthened. Guided by Lei Chen's will, it slowly began to condense into a specific form. Chapter 52, 9 Heavens Thunderstrike Sword, Ice Extreme Divine Crystal. Boom! When the 7th tribulation lightning fell, even the surrounding space developed fine black cracks that could not be mended for a long time. A 7-colored radiance swirled around Lei Chen as he steadily received this violent thunder. The purple-gold lightning mark on his forehead blazed as bright as a miniature sun, and the humming sound emanating from within became increasingly clear and majestic. He could clearly feel that the growing thunder god origin within his body was undergoing a qualitative transformation. Its total volume had finally broken through a certain critical point. Buzz! A roar that only Lei Chen himself could perceive echoed from the depths of his soul. At this moment, the thunder god divine seat, which had been shattered for countless tens of thousands of years, finally completed its initial reconstruction by relying on the majestic power of thunder accumulated from the 3 heavenly tribulations of the Snow Empress and Ice Empress. Although it was still far from the first-rank god position that wielded the authority of the thunder god at its peak, its status was established and its origin was solidified, meaning he would eventually be able to bring it to its zenith. Simultaneously, under Lei Chen's exquisite control, this solid thunder god origin, which had reached the god level, also began to condense and take shape into its final form. The power of the origin was like being hammered by an invisible divine smith, removing the last traces of impurities and outlining a clear silhouette. When the final purple-gold thunder dragon, possessing world-destroying power, was completely absorbed into Lei Chen's body with an unwilling roar and transformed into pure origin power, merging into that embryonic divine artifact, the entire shaping process was finally successfully completed. The tribulation clouds high in the sky seemed to have exhausted all their power and began to slowly dissipate. The extreme north land once again revealed its greyish-white sky, but the pervasive heavenly pressure did not vanish for a long time, bearing witness to the soul-stirring scene that had just occurred. Lei Chen slowly opened his eyes, and within them, thousands of lightning bolts seemed to flicker into existence and vanish before finally returning to tranquility. He lightly parted his lips and uttered a single, clear word. "Comes forth." As his voice fell, the purple-gold lightning mark on his forehead suddenly erupted with a blinding light, as if opening a door to the world of the thunder god Origin. In the next instant, a condensed streak of purple-gold lightning shot out, hovering before Lei Chen. The lightning expanded rapidly upon meeting the wind, transforming in the blink of an eye into a heavy sword with an ancient, broad-bladed design. The sword was about 5 feet long with a wide blade. Its entire body was a deep purple gold, as if condensed from the purest essence of thunder. Countless fine and complex lightning patterns were naturally engraved upon the blade. These patterns were not static but flowed slowly like living things, constantly drawing in and releasing the surrounding thunder elements, emitting a faint yet heart-palpitating, crackling sound. A sharp and peerless aura, filled with the meaning of destruction and judgment, naturally spread from the blade, causing the recently calmed space to ripple once again. Looking at the lightning-flickering heavy sword before him, a satisfied smile curled at the corners of Lei Chen's mouth. Using the thunder god origin of a newly entered god level as a foundation, the base is ultimately a bit thin. He murmured softly, his fingertips brushing across the cold blade as he felt the power contained within. Compared to you, it is indeed far inferior. The you he spoke of naturally referred to the guardian armor of living beings, which had been refined from the life essence of an entire plane and had reached the level of a super-divine artifact. Compared to the vast, sea-like power of the guardian armor of living beings, which contained the law of life and the power of creation, the thunder sword before him, in terms of energy level and the completeness of its laws, could only be considered an ordinary divine artifact, with power roughly equivalent to the artifacts used by third-rank deities. However, Lei Chen's tone shifted, and a look of expectation appeared in his eyes. Your potential is beyond what those fixed-rank divine artifacts can compare to. This sword was entirely condensed from his most fundamental thunder god power, sharing the same origin as him. It could be said to be an extension of his authority of the thunder god. Its greatest feature was its infinite growth potential. From now on, as long as this sword continued to devour high-quality thunder power, it could continuously grow. One day, it was not impossible for it to surpass the level of a divine artifact and advance to the realm of a super-divine artifact. Lei Chen placed high hopes on this second exclusive divine artifact he had refined. It would be the sharp blade he would use to confront powerful enemies and wield thunder in the future. I shall call you Nine Heavens Thunderstrike Sword. Lei Chen bestowed a name upon it, implying that its power could reach the 9 heavens, summon heavenly thunder, and strike down all things. The thunder-heavy sword seemed to sense this, its blade trembling slightly as it emitted a clear sword hum, and the lightning upon it seemed to brighten a few shades. At this time, a graceful figure flew up from the ice palace below. It was the Snow Empress, who had just stabilized her 800,000-year cultivation. She first looked curiously at the purple-gold heavy sword in Lei Chen's hand, which was surrounded by lightning and possessed a terrifying aura. Feeling that pure intent of destruction, her heart couldn't help but shudder. She then bowed respectfully. Once again, I thank Senior for the grace of protecting me, helping Snow Empress safely pass through this tribulation. With a flick of his wrist, the 9 Heavens Thunderstrike sword turned into a streak of purple-gold light and vanished back into the lightning mark on his forehead. He looked at the Snow Empress and said indifferently, "There is no need for such courtesy. I have said before that helping you through the tribulation is also beneficial to me. If not for the power of these 3 heavenly tribulations from you and the Ice Empress, the sword in my hand would not have taken shape so smoothly." He paused and encouraged her. "I look forward to your next breakthrough. At that time, the lightning quality of the 900,000-year heavenly tribulation will surely be on a higher level, which will be of great benefit to the growth of my sword." Hearing this, a flash of determination appeared in the Snow Empress's ice-blue eyes, and she nodded solemnly. "Senior, please rest assured. Snow Empress will certainly practice diligently without pause. With the help of the 10,000-year profound ice marrow, I am confident I can raise my cultivation to 900,000 years within a year." "Very good," Lei Chen nodded slightly in approval. He pondered for a moment, as if thinking of something, and then reached out to grab at the void. In an instant, dozens of strange crystals of various sizes, entirely a deep ice blue with liquid-like cold light flowing inside, abruptly appeared before Lei Chen. "This is Ice Extreme Divine Crystal, you should recognize it," Lei Chen said. "This is the top-tier ice attribute metal of this plane. Its texture is indestructible, and it can perfectly carry the power of ice attribute laws. It is an excellent material for refining ice attribute divine artifacts." With a wave of his sleeve, these dozens of incredibly precious ice extreme divine crystals slowly floated toward the Snow Empress. "Your cultivation has now reached 800,000 years. It is time to start considering refining your own divine artifact. These ice extreme divine crystals are a gift to you. You can try to use them as a foundation to nurture and construct the prototype of your divine artifact in advance. When you break through to 1,000,000-year cultivation and reclaim the position of the ice god, a natal divine artifact that perfectly fits you will be like adding wings to a tiger." Looking at the ice extreme divine crystals floating before her, which emitted an alluring ice blue glow, and feeling the majestic ice attribute energy and sturdy characteristics within, a look of surprise and gratitude once again appeared on the Snow Empress's beautiful face. Knowing the preciousness of these materials, she quickly gave a deep bow. "Snow Empress thanks Senior for the generous gift. I will not fail Senior's expectations." Chapter 53, A Steady Stream, Everything Settled. After gifting dozens of ice extreme divine crystals, emitting extreme cold to the Snow Empress, Lei Chen said no more. Refining a lifebound divine artifact is not the work of a single day, especially for a first-timer like the Snow Empress. It requires a long time to nurture and integrate. What he could provide were the top-tier materials. The rest would require the Snow Empress to comprehend and explore on her own. Just as the Snow Empress solemnly put away the ice extreme divine crystals and was about to thank him again, a streak of emerald light galloped from the sky with a sharp whistling sound, landing before the ice palace in an instant, revealing the Ice Empress's crystal-clear scorpion body. "Snow Empress, are you all right? That tribulation?" The Ice Empress's tone was urgent. Her diamond-like eyes first nervously swept over the Snow Empress. Confirming her aura was stable and vast, far exceeding the past, she breathed a sigh of relief. Then she looked at Lei Chen nearby and hurriedly lowered her head, respectfully saying, "Greetings, Your Eminence. I sensed the tribulation descending just now and was worried about the Snow Empress, so I rushed over." Lei Chen nodded slightly in response. His gaze fell on the Ice Empress as he said indifferently, "You've come at the right time. The Snow Empress has safely crossed the 800,000-year tribulation, and her cultivation has greatly advanced. Since you have reached the peak of 490,000 years and are only one step away from the 500,000-year bottleneck, there's no need to suppress it anymore." As he spoke, a light flashed from his fingertip, and a piece of 10,000-year profound ice marrow floated toward the Ice Empress. "Consume it and break through right here. Your 500,000-year tribulation lightning will also be useful to me." The Ice Empress was first stunned, then a look of pleasant surprise burst from her eyes. She had been stuck at 490,000 years for some time and already had a deep foundation. Had she not kept the Snow Empress's reminder to solidify her foundation in mind, she could have attempted to charge through the bottleneck long ago. Now, with the Plane Master personally protecting her, it was practically foolproof. She did not hesitate, swallowing the 10,000-year profound ice marrow that emitted a majestic cold in one gulp. Her massive scorpion body suddenly erupted with brilliant emerald light, and terrifying energy fluctuations spread out with her as the center, causing the surrounding ice layers to roar. She immediately prostrated herself on the ground, operating her cultivation technique with all her might, getting this vast energy to strike that solid barrier. With the help of the 10,000-year profound ice marrow, the Ice Empress's breakthrough was a natural progression. In less than half an hour, her aura suddenly surged, breaking through the 500,000-year mark in one fell swoop. Almost at the moment of her successful breakthrough, above the extreme northland, the tribulation clouds that had just dissipated gathered once more. Although their scale and pressure were far inferior to the Snow Empress's 800,000-year tribulation, that majestic heavenly power was still heart-palpitating. Boom crack! A purple-red tribulation lightning, several times thicker and deeper in color than the one from the Ice Empress's 400,000-year tribulation, tore through the clouds and struck down fiercely. Its energy level, though still at the limit Douluo level, was significantly stronger than the last time. However, this violent thunder failed to touch the Ice Empress at all. At the moment it descended, the purple-gold lightning pattern on Lei Chen's forehead suddenly lit up. A wide-bladed heavy sword, entirely purple-gold and surrounded by electric light, flashed into existence. It was the newly refined Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword. Lei Chen did not personally devour this tribulation lightning. Instead, with a thought, the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword let out a joyful hum and transformed into a purple electric dragon, proactively meeting the tribulation lightning. Chai! The moment the tribulation lightning contacted the sword body, there was no earth-shattering explosion. Instead, like 100 rivers flowing into the sea, it was completely devoured and absorbed by the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword. The lightning patterns on the sword body seemed to come alive, their flow speed quickening slightly, and the sharp aura it emitted also faintly strengthened. Following that, the second, third, until the final tribulation lightning were all handled by the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword in the same manner, devoured one by one. When the tribulation clouds had completely dispersed, the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword flew back into Lei Chen's hand. Its brilliance was withdrawn, but upon careful perception, one could find that its lightning origin had indeed grown a bit, its power increasing by about 20%. Not bad, Lei Chen lightly stroked the sword body and nodded slightly. Although the energy level of the 500,000-year tribulation was far from the god level, for the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword, which was already at the divine artifact grade, this small improvement was not huge, but it was real nourishment. He knew that the path of a divine artifact's promotion was long, and it was all about a steady stream, accumulating little by little. As long as there were more and more great beasts over 100,000 years old in this plane, the tribulation lightning would be continuous. This sword would eventually grow with him to the realm of a super-divine artifact. The Ice Empress had also stabilized her 500,000-year cultivation by now. Feeling the significant increase in her power, she joyfully came before Lei Chen and the Snow Empress. "Thank you, Your Eminence, for helping me break through." Lei Chen put away the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword, his gaze sweeping over the Snow and Ice Empresses as he instructed. "The matters here are concluded. You two must practice diligently and stabilize your realms, especially the Snow Empress. The refining of the 10,000-year profound ice marrow can be done slowly. There's no need to rush for success. When your cultivation reaches 900,000 years, I will naturally come again." "Yes, we shall follow Your Eminence's orders," the Snow and Ice Empresses responded in unison. Lei Chen said no more. 7 colored halos flowed around him, and his figure gradually faded, finally merging into the void and completely disappearing into the swirling snow of the extreme Northland. The next moment, in the Sea of Origin at the very core of the Douluo Plane, Lei Chen's figure quietly appeared, sitting at the center of the endless 7-colored flowing light. He closed his eyes, and the plane master's vast perception, like an invisible network, instantly covered every corner of their entire Douluo Plane. Since he exiled the god realm into the space-time turbulence and completely took control of this plane, all the arrangements he had made had now entered the right track and were showing a flourishing trend. In the extreme Northland, the plan to recast the divine seat was progressing steadily. The Snow Empress's cultivation was advancing by leaps and bounds, and the refining of her divine artifact was already on the agenda. On the continent, the recasting of the god of angels' god position was also proceeding in an orderly manner. Yigui held the angelic sacred sword, purifying evil and accumulating holy power. Meanwhile, Yi Zishui, Zhongli Wu, and others, acting as key future sacrifices, saw their cultivation improve under the assistance of their innate secret method and the ice and fire yin-yang well, greatly increasing their chances of breaking through to the god level. The cultivation of the plane's peak experts was even smoother. Under his observation, Debussy of the Body Sect, relying on their innate secret method and the unique environment of the ice and fire yin-yang well, had reached the pinnacle of physical tempering. His body faintly glowed with an immortal luster, clearly only one step away from forging a true divine body. Meanwhile, veteran limit Douluos like Mu En and Long Xiaorao, as well as newcomers like Xu and Zai, after receiving complete inheritances, were progressing far faster than before and were not far from touching the threshold of the divine body. It could be foreseen that in the near future, the Douluo Plane would surely give birth to its own true god-level experts. In the vast ocean, the chess pieces he had placed had also taken effect. Due to the pain of losing her husband and her hatred for Tang San and humans, the Demon Empress's actions became increasingly eccentric and violent, constantly devouring other sea soul beast tribes. Her world-destroying villainous behavior was continuously intensifying the conflicts and panic within the ocean. In contrast, the kind sea princess and her merfolk clan were silently protecting the weak, accumulating prestige and potential power of faith. The script of replicating the path of the first-generation sea god and cultivating a new sea god to cut off Tang San's faith was playing out smoothly according to his expectations. Even he himself, after this period of busyness, had successfully refined the guardian armor of living beings, a defensive super-divine artifact, and the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword, a growth-type divine artifact with infinite potential. With one for offense and one for defense, his system was beginning to take shape. Chapter 54, On a Whim, the Sudden Abyss Plane. In the Sea of Plane origin, colorful light slowly circled, reflecting Lei Chen's calm face. He had just used the supreme perception of the plane master to patrol his territory. All the arrangements he had made before were on track and showing vigorous vitality. He only needed to wait for time to pass, and these planted seeds would naturally flower and bear fruit, pushing the overall foundation of the Douluo Plane to a brand new height. Everything is settled. Next, I can be idle for a while, Lei Chen thought to himself, feeling a rare bit of relaxation. As the plane master, although he could control the overall situation, the previous series of layouts and actions had also cost him a lot of mental energy. Now that the general trend was established, he only needed to pay occasional attention to key nodes. He could finally slow down his pace a bit, savor the feedback brought by the growth of the plane, and further nourish his own divine tools and origin. However, just as Lei Chen's mind relaxed slightly, preparing to immerse himself in the vastness and tranquility of the Sea of Plane origin, buzz! A sudden feeling of palpitation, like the sharpest ice pick, stabbed fiercely into the depths of his soul. Lei Chen suddenly opened his eyes, his calm expression abruptly changing, and his eyes, deep as a sea of stars, erupted with unprecedented brilliance. This sudden feeling of palpitation did not come from within the plane, but from outside. A breath full of malice, greed, and as if wanting to devour everything, was locking onto the Douluo Plane from across the endless void. He subconsciously followed the direction of that palpitation, raising and extending his will infinitely, his gaze piercing through the plane barrier and casting into the cold, dark, and dead depths of the universe. Right on that endless black curtain, a huge plane emitting an ominous halo was approaching the Douluo Plane like a roaming greedy beast, in an undisguised and aggressive posture. The feeling that plane gave was completely opposite to the vitality of the Douluo Plane. It was full of destruction, slaughter, and the desire to devour everything. Its energy properties were violent and chaotic, as if it were an aggregate forcibly merged from countless negative emotions and laws of destruction. Wherever it passed, even the faint light of the cosmic background seemed to be swallowed by it. This feeling of destruction and devouring, it should be the Abyss Plane. Lei Chen narrowed his eyes, a look of realization flashing through them, but more of it was a touch of solemnity. It came so fast. Regarding the arrival of the Abyss Plane, Lei Chen was not surprised. In the original timeline, the invasion of the Douluo Plane by the Abyss Plane was arranged by Tang San. In other words, Tang San had actually discovered the existence of the Abyss Plane long ago, but had just kept it hidden. Now, the Silver Dragon King had triggered the space-time turbulence, banishing the God Realm along with Tang San. On the eve of the God Realm being completely dragged into the turbulence, Tang San, driven to desperation, made some emergency arrangements, leading the hungry wolf of the Abyss Plane here ahead of time to cause huge trouble for the Douluo Plane, just like in the original timeline. This was entirely within Lei Chen's expectations. The only thing he was slightly surprised by was the speed at which the Abyss Plane arrived. In his estimation, even if Tang San had tampered with things, it would take at least several hundred, or even 1,000 years for the Abyss Plane to go from being triggered to actually arriving near the Douluo Plane. After all, moving between planes, especially accurately positioning and crossing endless distances in the vast universe, was no easy task. With those hundreds or thousands of years of buffer time, with Lei Chen's methods and the development speed of the Douluo Plane, he would have long since managed the plane into a monolithic whole, and his own strength could reach a higher level. By then, the arrival of the Abyss Plane would be nothing more than a gift package, delivered to his door, which he could easily counter-devour and turn into nourishment for his own promotion. However, the reality was that since the God Realm was banished, it hadn't even been a year yet, and the hungry wolf of the Abyss Plane had already caught the scent and pounced to the doorstep. This speed was extraordinarily fast, frighteningly fast. It seems they can't wait. Lei Chen muttered to himself, a cold arc curling at the corner of his mouth. Instead of fear, a dangerous light flashed in his eyes. It was true that the early arrival of the Abyss Plane disrupted his pace of steady development, forcing him to face this plane-level survival crisis before he was fully prepared, but this was not necessarily a bad thing for him. Anyway, whether it came early or late, it had to come. Since it's here, don't even think about leaving. Lei Chen's gaze suddenly became sharp. The Abyss Plane wanted to devour him, and he wanted to devour the Abyss Plane too. This was a crucial step in his plan. A complete plane with a unique system of laws contained origin energy far beyond what the undead demi-plane he had merged with before could compare to. If Lei Chen could successfully devour it, the volume and foundation of the Douluo Plane would see explosive growth, and as the plane master, his strength would surely undergo a qualitative leap, potentially reaching the level of a half-step god king at the very least. Opportunities and risks coexist. The arrival of the Abyss Plane is a huge threat, but also a great opportunity. Therefore, he needs to make some arrangements immediately, and the first thing he needs to consider is whether to wake up the Silver Dragon King to solve this Abyss invasion problem together. In a flash of thought, Lei Chen's perception instantly swept over the Dragon Valley, small world attached to the Douluo Plane. There, the Silver Dragon King was slumbering to repair the heavy injuries she had sustained since the Dragon God War that had never fully healed. If she, a former peak first-level god powerhouse, were to take action, combined with Lei Chen as the plane master, even if the Abyss Plane came in full force, it would mostly be a futile death. But Lei Chen's gaze only stayed in the direction of Dragon Valley for a moment before he decisively withdrew it. Better not disturb her, he had already made a decision. The Silver Dragon King's injuries were related to the fundamental plan for confronting the God Realm in the future. The healing process absolutely could not afford any mistakes. Although the current situation seemed critical, it was far from a life-or-death moment that required interrupting her recovery process. Moreover, Lei Chen was confident that even without the Silver Dragon King's help, he could solve the problem of this Abyss Plane invasion. After all, in the current Douluo Plane, besides the Silver Dragon King, there was another fellow whose strength was not weak. Thinking of this, Lei Chen's perception immediately probed into a certain spatial layer of the Douluo Plane. There, a god-level soul wrapped in endless life origin was shining brightly. It was exactly Electrolux. When this necromancer saint god first arrived at the Douluo Plane, he only had a wisp of broken divine sense left, which could have dissipated at any time. However, under the full nourishment of the life origin mobilized by Lei Chen, his divine sense was about to be completely restored, and he would be Lei Chen's greatest assistant in confronting the Abyss Plane next. Chapter 55, Electrolux, Divine Sense Fully Restored. Within the Sea of Plane Origin, Lei Chen's thoughts shifted from his vigilance toward the external Abyss Plane back to the interior. His perception, like the most precise probe, delved deep into a stable spatial interlayer within the Douluo Plane. This place was no longer the fragile space it once was, maintained only by thin life energy. Over the past year, under Lei Chen's conscious guidance, the vast power of the life origin had continuously nourished this area, making it vibrant and full of life, like a sacred nursery. At the center of this life energy, a soul body floated quietly. Compared to the broken wisp of weak divine sense that seemed ready to dissipate at any moment when he first arrived, the current Electrolux had undergone an earth-shaking transformation. His divine soul was solid and brilliant, emitting soft yet powerful mental fluctuations. His silhouette was clear and his expression peaceful, like a divine statue cast from pure light and soul. The originally illusory and crack-filled portions had been mostly repaired. The entire divine soul radiated a harmonious glow, with only a few subtle areas still appearing hazy, just one final step of tempering away from being completely restored to its original state. Sensing Electrolux's currently stable and flourishing state, Lei Chen nodded slightly. In the next moment, his true body directly pierced through the spatial barrier, descending into this interlayer filled with the breath of life. The natural majesty of the plane master flowing around him caused the life energy here to become even more active. Electrolux, how do you feel now? Lei Chen looked at the brilliant divine soul and spoke calmly. Electrolux's divine soul fluctuated slightly, and his eyes, condensed from the light of the soul, slowly opened, filled with wisdom and the peace of one who had experienced many vicissitudes. Facing Lei Chen, he spoke in a gentle voice filled with heartfelt gratitude. "Respected Plane Master, I feel better than ever before. This feeling of fullness and completeness has been missing for far too many years. If not for your continuous nourishment with the plane's life origin over this past year, it would have been impossible for me to recover to this extent from my previous state of being at death's door." Lei Chen smiled faintly, his tone casual yet carrying an unquestionable certainty. "There is no need for such politeness. Between you and me, a god's covenant was established long ago. Since you have fulfilled your promise by merging the undead demi-plane into this world and helping me break through the bottleneck to step into the realm of a first-level god, helping you restore your divine soul is merely my duty in fulfilling our agreement." Although Lei Chen spoke lightly, the light of Electrolux's divine soul flickered slightly, revealing even more sincere emotions. "That may be true, but a covenant is a covenant, and a kindness is a kindness. Back then, I was but a remnant soul drifting in a foreign world. If you hadn't lent a helping hand, given me a place to stay, and nourished me with the origin, I would have likely dissipated into nothingness long ago. You pulled me back from the brink of extinction and reshaped my divine soul. This kindness is like giving me a second life. Electrolux shall keep it in his heart." Lei Chen waved his hand, no longer dwelling on pleasantries. His gaze fell upon the last few imperfect spots of Electrolux's divine soul, and he said, "All right, let's not mention those things for now. Seeing your current state, everything is ready except for the final push. I will complete those last fragments today and help your divine soul reach total perfection." Oh, upon hearing this, the fluctuations of Electrolux's divine soul became significantly more active, radiating a sense of anticipation. He knew the importance of this step. Once fully perfected, he would not only restore his divine sense power from his peak period, but because he had been nourished by the purest life origin of the Douluo Plane during this time, the essence of his divine soul might be even more refined and resilient than it was in his original world. Therefore he did not decline further and responded solemnly, "In that case, I shall trouble the Plane Master." Seeing that Electrolux was ready, Lei Chen said no more. His gaze sharpened, and the supreme authority of the Plane Master fully unfolded. In an instant, the life origin power within the entire spatial interlayer converged toward Electrolux's divine soul with unprecedented concentration and activity, as if hearing an emperor's command. Not just this interlayer, but even the golden ancient tree far away in the core of the Stardew Great Forest, acting as the plane's life core, seemed to be triggered. Its entire body burst forth with an even more dazzling golden glow, as vast life energy poured continuously into this place through the plane's meridians and across space. Electrolux's divine soul was instantly enveloped in a golden cocoon that had almost turned liquid. That extremely pure power of life and creation was no longer a gentle nourishment, but was like the finest craftsman performing the final intricate carving, or like a heavenly furnace performing the ultimate tempering. Inside the light cocoon, those hazy, not yet solidified details of Electrolux's divine soul became clear and solid at a visible speed under the washing and filling of this vast power. The light emitted by the divine soul became purer and more stable, and a realm of flawless perfection and primordial unity began to permeate the air. The entire spatial interlayer vibrated slightly, not because of a power riot, but because of the resonance of laws triggered when a powerful divine soul was about to reach total perfection. It was unknown how much time had passed. Perhaps it was just a moment, or perhaps it was eternity. Buzz! A clear and melodious hum, seemingly originating from the source of the soul, rang out from the center of the golden light cocoon. This hum was not loud, yet it carried a strange power that cleansed all impurities and announced a perfect birth. It instantly spread throughout the spatial interlayer and even faintly leaked out, causing slight ripples in the sea of plane origin. Following that, the massive golden cocoon slowly became transparent and finally receded like a tide, turning into spots of crystalline green light particles that dissipated in the air, completely revealing the figure within. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribers, and share to AI Otaku Studio. At this moment, Electrolux's divine soul no longer had a single flaw. He floated in the air, his form as condensed as a physical body, radiating a gentle yet vast milky white glow. His face was clear and majestic, carrying the wisdom of ages. As his eyes opened and closed, divine light was contained within, as if he could see through the myriad worlds of the void. Powerful divine sense energy flowed out naturally. Although restricted within this space, its quality had reached the god level, and was definitely not something an ordinary third-rank deity could compare to. Electrolux slowly lowered his head, feeling the long-lost, abundant, and perfectly harmonious divine sense power within him, his heart filled with mixed emotions. Once upon a time, he thought he would eventually dissipate like mist. How could he have ever imagined he would see the day he returned to his peak, or even went a step further? He raised his palm, condensed from pure divine soul light, and clenched it gently, feeling the power contained within. Then he looked up at Lei Chen, who stood with his hands behind his back and a calm expression. Electrolux placed one hand over his chest and leaned forward slightly, performing a gesture of the highest respect from his world. His voice was steady and full of sincerity. "Thank you, Plane Master, for helping me regain a new life." Chapter 56, Reshaping the Physical Body, the Return of the Necromancer Saint God. For a mage who has spent his life studying the mysteries of the soul and spirit, the divine soul is the foundation. Now that Electrolux's divine soul was fully restored, even surpassing its former state, it was indeed equivalent to recovering the vast majority of his strength. To say he had gained a new life was no exaggeration. Lei Chen smiled faintly upon hearing this and waved his hand, saying, "Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. It is still too early to speak of new life at this moment." Electrolux's divine soul flickered slightly, revealing a hint of confusion. Lei Chen gazed calmly at his brilliant, yet still illusory, divine soul body and continued. "Though your divine soul is now complete and your divine sense power is fully restored, you are ultimately just a soul body, like duckweed without roots. This is not a long-term solution. True rebirth is only complete when one possesses both a divine soul and a physical body, achieving the unity of spirit and flesh." Electrolux instantly understood Lei Chen's meaning. He intended to recast a physical body for him. Waves of emotion surged in his heart once more. Since his physical body perished in the original divine seal plane, and he had been drifting as a remnant soul until now, he did not know how many long ages had passed. He had almost grown accustomed to this existence as a pure soul body. If he could once again possess a real body and feel the pulse of flesh and blood, it would undoubtedly be a complete return in the truest sense. He had already said many words of thanks before, and he knew that for a being like Lei Chen, too many words would instead seem hollow and distant. Thus, Electrolux suppressed his excitement and merely bowed solemnly once more, saying concisely, "In that case, I shall trouble you." "MHM," Lei Chen nodded slightly, his expression becoming a bit more focused. Repairing your divine soul used that remaining wisp of your divine sense as a guide, progressing step by step. Although difficult, it followed a traceable path. But recasting a physical body is different. Your former shell has long since been annihilated without leaving a trace. This time we must create from nothing, a creation out of thin air. The process is far more tedious and complex than repairing a divine soul. That said, it clearly wasn't enough to stump Lei Chen. With a mere thought, 7-colored lights swirled around him. In the next moment, a suit of full-body armor, deep dark gold in color and flowing with a soft, restrained glow, quietly emerged. It was the super-divine artifact refined from the life essence of the plane, the guardian armor of living beings. The moment the armor appeared, the life aura within the spatial rift surged abruptly, as if billions of living beings were whispering and chanting here, praising the immortality and miracle of life. At this moment, Lei Chen did not put on the armor. Instead, he held his hands out as if supporting something, and the guardian armor of living beings quickly transformed as if it possessed a spirit of its own, reverting to its original form. A fist-sized, perfectly round and flawless, brilliant golden sphere with countless mysterious patterns engraved on its surface. The sphere floated quietly above Lei Chen's palm. It seemed to contain the very first wisp of vitality from the dawn of the universe, radiating a heart-palpitating power of creation. "Go," Lei Chen flicked his finger, and the brilliant golden sphere flew lightly toward Electrolux's divine soul, finally hovering in front of his forehead. Next, Lei Chen formed hand seals, and the vast divine power of the Plane Master erupted without reservation, invoking the most fundamental laws of life and creation of the Douluo Plane. He gave a low shout, and brilliant 7-colored divine light burst from his fingertips like a painter, wielding a brush filled with the ultimate truths of heaven and earth, invoking the boundless, infinite original power of the super-divine artifact within that brilliant golden sphere. Buzz! The sphere shook violently, and a pillar of brilliant golden light, condensed to the extreme and nearly liquefied like a fountain of life, suddenly erupted from it, completely enveloping Electrolux's entire divine soul. This pillar of light was not a simple infusion of energy, it contained the purest life origin and laws. Under Lei Chen's exquisite control, these forces began to perform the most meticulous and fundamental construction, centered around Electrolux's complete divine soul. First to appear was the phantom of bones, translucent like white jade. Following the memory and form of Electrolux's divine soul origin, a complete skeleton was quickly outlined, each bone naturally flowing with an immortal luster. Next, meridians and blood vessels, like the veins of the earth, branched out and spread from the bones, and a network of countless tiny blood vessels intertwined and took shape. Subsequently, muscle fibers began to grow and fill in, covering the skeleton and presenting a healthy color and full form. The whole process seemed slow, but in reality, it was as fast as a flash of light. The growth of flesh and blood and the formation of internal organs proceeded rapidly under the illumination of that brilliant golden light of life. A heart began to throb, letting out steady and powerful thump, thump, sounds like the beating of war drums, announcing the return of life. The liver, kidneys, lungs, the major organs appeared one after another and quickly began to perform their original functions. As a super-divine artifact, the great power of Life Guardian within the guardian armor of living beings was displayed to the fullest at this moment. No matter how severe the injury, even if only a single breath remained, it could bring one back to life. Using it to recast a physical body from nothing was even more extraordinary in its effect. That vast, sea-like power of the life origin ensured that the process of physical reshaping was perfect, without a single flaw or hidden danger. Electrolux's divine soul was immersed in the embrace of this fountain of life, feeling the long-lost, strange sensation of flesh and blood growing. An indescribable sense of fulfillment and belonging welled up in his heart. His divine soul actively let go of all defenses, engaging in the deepest level of fusion with this brand new body being born. When the last patch of skin was covered, a male body that perfectly fit Electrolux's divine soul and radiated a faint divine light was completely formed. Because its foundation was molded by the life origin of a super-divine artifact and the laws of the Plane Master, this physical body had already transcended the mortal coil and reached the level of a divine body the moment it was born. And at the very instant, the recasting of the divine body was complete. Boom! An aura far stronger than when his divine soul was completed earlier suddenly erupted from within Electrolux's new body. The divine soul and divine body fused perfectly, with no more barriers between spirit and flesh, producing an astonishing qualitative change where 1 + 1 was greater than 2. Milky white holy brilliance and brilliant golden light intertwined and shot into the sky, illuminating the entire spatial rift as if a divine kingdom had descended. Powerful divine sense and newborn divine power blended seamlessly, forming a vast pressure. Although restricted to this place by Lei Chen, its quality was so high that it had firmly stepped across the god-level threshold. A true, complete god-level powerhouse had announced his return. The brilliance gradually receded, and Electrolux slowly opened those eyes that contained endless wisdom and the vicissitudes of time. He lowered his head, looking at his hands which were real and contained vast power, and lightly moved his fingers, feeling the clear tactile sensation from his fingertips. He raised his hand again, stroking his cheek. That warm body temperature and elastic skin all told him that everything was real. He slowly raised his head and looked at Lei Chen, who had been guarding him by his side. A complex yet relieved smile appeared on his face as he sighed softly. It really is a long-lost feeling. Long before I came to this plane, my physical body in my homeland had already perished for 10,000 years. After such a long time, I finally have a body of my own again. Chapter 57, Bestowing the Status of the Undead Space, Second Level God. Electrolux felt the warmth of the blood flowing through his body, and the majestic power brought by the perfect fusion of his divine soul with this brand new divine body. A hint of reminiscence and emotion couldn't help but flash in his eyes. 10,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. The flesh and blood of his former homeland had long since turned to dust, yet now he had regained new life in a foreign plane. The strangeness of this encounter made even a necromancer saint god like him, who had experienced many vicissitudes, feel a sense of sighing. Lei Chen looked at the complex expression on his face and spoke calmly, his voice peaceful yet carrying a power that smoothed the mind. All things of the past are like drifting smoke. Since you have regained new life, you should treat it as a brand new beginning. This plane is your new journey. Hearing this, Electrolux's body shook slightly, and then he slowly nodded. The look of reminiscence in his eyes quickly faded, replaced by a calmness that comes after weathering 1,000 storms. He took a deep breath, as if drawing 10,000 years of ups and downs into his chest, then slowly exhaled. His gaze had become clear and focused. "You are right, Plane Master. There is no meaning in dwelling on the past. Since I am reborn here, I should naturally start anew in this place." Electrolux's voice was steady, carrying a determination born from destruction and rebirth. Lei Chen nodded slightly, quite satisfied with Electrolux's shift in mindset. He continued, "In that case, let us begin by fulfilling the agreement we made back then. You have already integrated the undead demiplane into this world to help me break through. According to the contract, the undead space, formed by the undead demiplane, still belongs to you in terms of status. Now that your state is fully restored, it is time to formally bestow it upon you." Before his voice had even faded, Lei Chen lightly flicked his sleeve. Electrolux only felt the surrounding scenery blur slightly. It wasn't the kind of violent spatial tearing or dizziness, but rather as if the image before his eyes was gently wiped away by an invisible hand and instantly redrawn. The next moment, that rich aura of life had completely vanished, replaced by a familiar, unique energy field mixed with the meaning of death and silence. The two had already left that spatial fold filled with life origin, and were now standing in a grey, strange space. The sky was eternally black, the earth was cracked, and in the distance, vague figures of undead creatures could be seen wandering. The air was permeated with faint soul fluctuations and the scent of decay. This place was precisely the undead space formed after Electrolux's undead demiplane integrated into the Douluo Plane. However, upon first arriving here, Electrolux's face did not immediately show emotion for his old haunt. Instead, it revealed a subtle hint of surprise and contemplation. He subconsciously recalled that instantaneous spatial transition. It was too fast, too natural. So natural that even a former god-level powerhouse like himself had failed to detect any ripples of spatial laws being invoked, nor did he feel any discomfort from being forcibly transferred. It was as if he was meant to appear here. The previous departure and current return were merely the natural results of a shifting thought. Is this the Plane Master's absolute control over space? Electrolux felt a secret chill in his heart. It is not relying on brute force to tear through space for travel, but rather like adjusting the placement of objects within one's own domain. Where the mind goes, the position changes. A process that even perception cannot capture is naturally impossible to resist. Such methods are truly unfathomable. Lei Chen naturally did not know the waves in Electrolux's heart at this moment. He stood suspended under the dark sky of the undead space, his gaze calmly sweeping across this land he had personally integrated. As the Plane Master, he could clearly sense the authority mark at the core of this region, hanging high in the sky within that sun, emitting a faint purple light. That was the manifestation of the undead space's status. Focus your mind and prepare to receive the status. Lei Chen did not delay further, speaking up to pull Electrolux's thoughts back. Electrolux immediately composed himself, suppressing his wonder at the spatial power. He nodded solemnly, then closed his eyes, adjusting his state to its peak, and fully sensing this space with which he had a deep connection. Lei Chen was seen slowly raising his right hand. 7 colored light of laws flowed from his fingertips. It was not for attack or defense, but like weaving threads of fate, sketching complex and profound runes in the air. These runes jumped and combined like living things, finally turning into a stream of light that shot directly toward the purple sun in the sky. Buzz! Triggered by the will of the Plane Master, that purple sun suddenly erupted with brilliant light. The originally dim radiance instantly became dazzling, bathing the entire undead space in a vibrant purple hue. Immediately after, a thick, solid-looking pillar of purple light, like the Milky Way pouring down from the 9 heavens, crashed down from the center of the sun, aimed straight at Electrolux standing below. The moment the light pillar touched his body, Electrolux's frame shook slightly, but he had long been prepared, opening his body and mind completely to accept it. Majestic and vast energy, like a flood breaking through a dam, surged frantically into his body. This energy was not simple life force or spirit power, but the original source power containing the fundamental laws of the undead space, perfectly matching Electrolux's own divine soul and divine body attributes. Under the infusion of this source power, Electrolux's aura began to climb rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. His cultivation barriers, which had just reached the god level and still needed stabilization, became like wet paper under the impact of this power, breaking instantly. Divine power roared through his meridians, and divine consciousness rapidly expanded and condensed within his soul sea. Level 101, Level 105, Level 109. The upper limits of levels that the Douluo Plane could currently carry were easily crossed. However, the elevation did not stop. Although the undead demi-plane was far smaller than the Douluo main plane, its complete framework of laws and accumulated foundation were enough to support the status of a second-rank deity. Now, under Lei Chen's guidance, this entire potential belonging to the undead space was being poured without reservation into Electrolux, the original creator and now the successor of this status. Electrolux began to emit an increasingly powerful pressure. Milky white holy radiance and the purple light of the undead space intertwined, forming a peculiar scene that was both contradictory and harmonious. His figure seemed to become taller and more solid within the light pillar, as if he had achieved a deep resonance with the entire undead space. Every movement could trigger a response from the laws of this world. When the light of the purple sun gradually faded from its peak, finally returning to its original state of faint burning, the infusion of energy also drew to a close. Electrolux slowly opened his eyes, a divine light shining in his pupils, as if scenes of countless undead living and dying and laws circulating flashed by. He lightly clenched his fist, feeling the divine power within his body that far exceeded before, vast and boundless like an ocean, as well as the sense of control in his divine soul that was closely linked to the undead space and as easy to use as his own limbs. His cultivation had already steadily stepped into the level of a second-level god. Chapter 58, Gauging Combat Strength, the Abyss Must Be Destroyed. Within the undead space, as the light of the purple sun in the sky gradually converged, the vast infusion of energy also slowly subsided. Electrolux hovered quietly, the oppressive aura radiating from his body now firmly stabilized at a whole new level, that of a second-rank deity. He clenched his fist slightly, feeling the divine power surging and flowing within his body, vastly more immense and pure than before, and the incredibly clear, intimate connection between his divine soul and this undead space. A powerful sense of wielding laws, of words shaping reality, spontaneously arose. Now he was the undisputed master of this undead space. His will was the will of this land. Lei Chen looked at Electrolux, whose aura was as deep and boundless as the sea, and nodded with satisfaction. A complete second-rank deity was undoubtedly a crucial strategic asset for the current Douluo Plane. Your divine rank has stabilized. Congratulations, Electrolux, Lei Chen spoke calmly. Now that your strength is fully restored, even surpassing your former self, you are the second strongest existence in this plane, second only to me. Electrolux withdrew the divine light surrounding him, faced Lei Chen, and performed an elegant bow, his tone sincere, all thanks to the plane master's assistance. Without your full support, Electrolux would never have reached this day. Lei Chen waved his hand dismissively, then shifted the topic. However, your current situation is rather similar to mine not long ago. A flicker of thought passed through Electrolux's eyes. Lei Chen continued, although you now possess the divine power and rank of a second-level god, you lack a divine artifact that matches you and can perfectly unleash your strength. Crushing lower-tier beings with your higher rank is naturally effortless, but when facing enemies of the same level or stronger, lacking a suitable divine artifact would inevitably put you at a disadvantage. Upon hearing this, Electrolux immediately understood. As a grandmaster of alchemy, he naturally knew full well how crucial a divine artifact perfectly attuned to oneself was for enhancing combat power. Not only did his expression show no difficulty, but a confident smile, belonging to a top-tier alchemical master, appeared on his face. Forging a divine artifact is no difficult matter for me. He paused, a glimmer of recollection flashing in his eyes. In my home plane, at the peak of my power, I once personally forged creations known as great divine artifacts. Their might was not far from that of a true super-divine artifact. Now that my divine soul and physical body are fully restored, and with the foundation of a second-level god's rank, I am fully confident in forging a divine artifact suitable for my current use. It will just require some time to gather appropriate materials and complete the forging process. Hearing Electrolux's words, Lei Chen also nodded in understanding. He naturally had no worries about Electrolux's artifact forging capabilities, so he said directly, "That's good then. You may forge the divine artifacts you need on your own. If you have any material requirements, you may also mobilize the plane's resources." Thank you, I will begin preparations shortly. Electrolux nodded in agreement. Seeing that matters with Electrolux were properly arranged and required no further attention from him, Lei Chen did not linger. His figure flickered and dissipated on the spot like a gentle breeze, leaving the undead space. Returning to the Sea of Plane origin, Lei Chen's focus once again turned towards the abyss plane, filled with greed and destructive aura, constantly approaching through the depths of cosmic space. With a powerful enemy imminent, he needed to calmly assess the strength comparison between his side and the opponent. As far as he knew, the top combatant of the abyss plane was undoubtedly the Abyssal Saint Lord, whose strength was unquestionably at the level of a first-level deity. Moreover, the Abyssal Saint Lord wielded a super-divine artifact, the Heavenly Saint Abyss-Splitting Halberd. This halberd possessed terrifying offensive power with the characteristic of ignoring defenses, ranking among the strongest offensive super-divine artifacts. Looking at his own side, Lei Chen himself was the plane master with the rank of a first-level deity. He also possessed a super-divine artifact, the Guardian Armor of Living Beings. Although primarily defensive, its nature as a super-divine artifact was sufficient to withstand the sharpness of the Heavenly Saint Abyss-Splitting Halberd. On the offensive front, he had the Growth Type 9 Heaven's Thunderstrike Sword. Although currently only at the level of an ordinary divine artifact, its potential and compatibility with himself were extremely high. From this perspective, at the apex of combat power, a rough equilibrium can be formed between me and the Abyssal Saint Lord. He has first-level God Cultivation, plus a super-divine artifact for offense. I have first-level God Cultivation, plus a super-divine artifact for defense. Neither can gain an advantage over the other in a short time. Lei Chen analyzed coolly in his heart. However, a balance at the apex did not equate to stability in the overall battle. The most terrifying aspect of the Abyss Plane lay in its vast mid-tier forces and endless hordes of abyss creatures. Based on Lei Chen's perception and inferences from existing information, within the Abyss Plane, there were at least several dozen abyssal kings possessing strength equivalent to the human limit Douluo level. The number of abyss creatures was counted in billions upon billions. Looking at the Douluo Plane's side, the number of those currently confirmed to have reached the limit Douluo level of strength, even including spirit beasts, could be counted on one's fingers, less than 10 top-tier combatants capable of facing the Abyssal Kings head-on. The numerical disparity was simply too vast. In other words, once Lei Chen and the Abyssal Saint Lord were locked in a stalemate, mutually restraining each other and unable to intervene in the lower-tier battles. Then, those several dozen Abyssal Kings at the limit Douluo level, leading the endless Abyss Legions, would be sufficient to slaughter the Douluo Plane's high-tier combatants in a short time, and subsequently devour the life force of the entire plane. This was undoubtedly a fatal vulnerability. No matter how powerful he, the plane master, was, if the plane's life forms were slaughtered and devoured, damaging the plane's origin, he would become like a tree without roots, his strength greatly diminished. However, Lei Chen's gaze sharpened. Now we have Electrolux. Electrolux's existence was undoubtedly the greatest variable to overturn this disadvantage. A necromancer saint god in perfect condition, possessing the strength of a second-rank deity, held extraordinary significance. In Lei Chen's projections, when he and the Abyssal Saint Lord formed a stalemate at the highest level, Electrolux would be free to act. A second-level god intervening in a first-level god battle might be beyond his capability, but dealing with those Abyssal Kings, whose peak strength was only at the limit Douluo level, would be absolute suppression. He absolutely had the ability to clear the field in a short time, resolving all those several dozen Abyssal Kings, along with the armies they led. Thus, at the high-tier combat level, I am on par with the Abyssal Saint Lord. At the mid-tier level, with Electrolux as this crucial piece, we can reverse the situation. Even if we can seize the opportunity, there is a great possibility of counter-devouring the Abyss Plane. Thinking of this, a gleam of light instantly flashed in Lei Chen's eyes. The very reason he had spared no expense in consuming origin power to help Electrolux fully recover the moment he sensed the Abyss Plane heading this way was precisely because he recognized his immense value as a strategic variable. With Electrolux, the Douluo Plane's chances of victory against the Abyss invasion had risen from a 50-50 split to over 70%. Chapter 59, The Perfect Fusion of Tools, Spirits and Alchemy, A New Path to Godhood. Within the Sea of Plane origin, Lei Chen finished mentally organizing the preliminary strategy to counter the Abyss Plane. With Electrolux as a powerful piece capable of turning the tide in the crucial mid-level battles, their chances of victory had already greatly increased. However, Lei Chen, ever cautious by nature, understood the principle that even a lion must use its full strength to catch a rabbit. Facing the invasion of an entire plane, one could never be too prepared. Thus, he decided to further bolster the Douluo Plane's odds of success. With a slight stir of his thoughts, his figure vanished from the Sea of Origin, shimmering with multicolored light. In the next moment, deep within the heavily guarded Royal Hall of Offerings, in the capital of the Sun-Moon Empire. Space rippled subtly, and Lei Chen's figure appeared soundlessly in an alchemy laboratory filled with precise spirit tools and various strange metallic materials. In the center of the laboratory, Kong Deming, the father of spirit tools in the Sun-Moon Empire, was completely focused on an object floating before him. It was his life-bound spirit tool, the manifestation of his spirit, the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield. At this moment, the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield emitted a soft silver radiance. On its surface, countless intricate, faintly golden lines flowed and intertwined slowly, forming a three-dimensional and profound matrix. This was precisely one of the core formations from the high-level alchemy inheritance Lei Chen had previously bestowed upon him, which originated from the Divine Seal Plane. Spirit power flowed condensed from Kong Deming's fingertips as he carefully executed the final strokes. His gaze was fervent and focused, utterly unaware of the fine beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Finally, as the last stroke of the alchemical rune connected perfectly, the entire three-dimensional matrix suddenly lit up. Hum! A clear, melodious hum emanated from within the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield. The faint golden matrix seemed to come alive, beginning to operate on its own. In that instant, the heaven and earth origin energy surrounding the laboratory, and even the entire Hall of Offerings, was stirred as if by an invisible giant hand. It transformed into visible streams of pale white energy, frantically converging towards the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield. The energy streams swirled, even forming a small vortex at its center, where the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield greedily absorbed the energy. Success! The alchemy matrix successfully resonated with and drew upon the power of heaven and earth. Kong Deming abruptly raised his head. His weary face was instantly filled with immense excitement and joy, his eyes sparkling with uncontrollable radiance. After nearly a year of painstaking research and countless failed simulations, he had finally, at this very moment, perfectly fused the supreme alchemy from another plane with his own life-bound spirit tool. And it was at this peak of excitement that the corner of his eye finally caught sight of Lei Chen, standing quietly to the side with a faint smile. Kong Deming's heart immediately jolted. All his excitement instantly transformed into profound reverence. He hurriedly composed himself, stepped forward quickly, and bowed deeply. His voice was slightly hoarse from his earlier agitation. Your junior, Kong Deming, was unaware of the Plane Master's arrival and failed to greet you from afar. I beg for your esteemed self's forgiveness. Lei Chen gave a slight nod. His gaze swept over the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield that was voraciously devouring heaven and earth origin energy, his tone carrying a hint of praise. There is no need for such formalities. You have done well. His voice was calm, yet it greatly encouraged Kong Deming. Lei Chen continued, It has been less than a year since I bestowed that alchemy inheritance upon you. Not only have you grasped its essence, but you have also applied your learning. Pushing your life-bound spirit tool to a higher level, such comprehension and dedication have truly not disappointed my expectations. Just as Lei Chen's words fell, the transformation of the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield also reached its climax. After absorbing a vast amount of heaven and earth origin energy, the silver light on its surface grew increasingly brilliant, gradually transforming into a deeper, more restrained moonglow hue. The originally strongly metallic shield body now seemed to have turned into flowing liquid radiance, exuding a sacred and powerful aura. The alchemical matrix inscribed upon it solidified completely, merging with the shield body itself. It no longer flickered, but instead emitted a constant golden halo from within. A pressure far exceeding that of a 10-grade spirit tool slowly permeated the air. It was a qualitative change, a symbol of mortal metal transforming into divine weaponry. At this moment, the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield had successfully crossed that chasm, truly advancing from the quasi-divine artifact level to become a divine artifact. Another soft hum sounded, but this time it was distant and majestic, as if emanating from the highest heavens, announcing the birth of a new divine artifact. The silver moon divine light shield slowly retracted its radiance, its size seeming to shrink slightly but becoming more condensed. It hovered quietly in the air, its surface flowing with moonlight, emanating a heart-palpitating power. Looking at the successfully transformed divine artifact, a flash of understanding passed through Lei Chen's eyes. He said to Kong Deming, "Congratulations, Kong Deming. Your silver moon divine light shield is now a true divine artifact." Kong Deming gazed excitedly at the treasure born of his heart's blood, his hands trembling slightly with elation. Lei Chen shifted the focus, pointing out the deeper significance of this event. This object was created by you, based on your own spirit and combined with your lifelong skill in spirit tools. It is bound to your very life, an extension and sublimation of your spirit, now that it has taken the lead in transforming into a divine artifact. Lei Chen's gaze seemed capable of piercing through Kong Deming's very origin. He stated calmly, "It means your spirit has also, through this divine artifact's form, reached the divine level ahead of time. The divine artifact nourishes its master in return. From now on, all bottlenecks on your cultivation path, up to the level 100 divine realm, will cease to exist. You need only accumulate spirit power step by step, and you will smoothly break through to the divine level." Upon hearing this, the look of pleasant surprise on Kong Deming's face instantly reached its peak, even surpassing his joy at the successful forging of the divine artifact moments before. His original greatest goal was merely to forge a divine artifact belonging to the Sun-Moon Empire, to strengthen the nation's power and increase his own foundation, hoping perhaps to glimpse a sliver of opportunity for reaching the divine level in the future. He never imagined that the weapon achieving divinity would, in turn, pave a smooth, broad road to godhood for himself. This was an unexpected delight, a heaven-sent fortune. "This, esteemed one, is this truly the case?" Kong Deming's voice trembled, hardly daring to believe his ears. Lei Chen smiled faintly. "Why would I deceive you? For the spirit to achieve divinity before the person, while not the orthodox path, is indeed a viable shortcut." Looking at Kong Deming, overjoyed and already seeing the light of the divine realm, Lei Chen also smiled slightly. Indeed, the system that pushed alchemy to its peak in the divine seal plane has a compatibility with the Douluo Plane's tool spirit system that far exceeds expectations. For ordinary spirit masters, they themselves must first reach the divine level, possessing both a divine soul and a divine body, before they can refine and elevate their own tool spirits into divine artifacts. But now, with the power of alchemy, one can proceed in the opposite direction. By first concentrating resources and wisdom, one can push the life-bound tool spirit, through external objects and techniques, to the grade of a divine artifact ahead of time. Once the divine artifact is formed, it is like planting a divine-level seed within a mortal vessel. It continuously nourishes the host, naturally guiding them towards the divine realm. This is tantamount to opening a brand new path to godhood for spirit masters with tool spirits. Chapter 60, War Mobilization, Arming the Great Army. In the laboratory of the Hall of Worship, the lingering aura from the newly completed divine artifact had not yet fully dissipated. The silver moon divine light shield hovered in midair, moonlight flowing across its surface, emanating an awe-inspiring majesty. Kong Deming was still immersed in the immense shock and delight of his spirit being nourished by the divine artifact, and the path forward now being clear, when Lei Chen's calm yet indisputable voice reached his ears. "While this path can lead to godhood, the threshold is extremely high," Lei Chen said indifferently, his gaze seeming to pierce through the future. "In the current age, you are the only one who has delved deep enough into the otherworld's alchemical system to be capable of forging a divine artifact. Therefore, for this plane, this path remains a singular case, and will be difficult to popularize in the short term." Upon hearing this, Kong Deming quickly calmed down from his ecstasy and pondered carefully. It was indeed true. How arduous was the forging of a divine artifact? His success was because he was already a 10th-rank soul engineer. Replicating it would be no easy feat. "Your judgment is wise, exalted one," Kong Deming replied respectfully. "This method is indeed exceedingly demanding and difficult to propagate. In comparison, using the ice and fire yin-yang well to temper the physical body, supplemented by the innate secret method asterisk, though the progress is slightly slower, is more stable and universally applicable, suitable for the vast majority of spirit masters. As long as you understand this, it is sufficient. Let us set this matter aside for now. Lei Chen gave a slight nod, then shifted the topic, his tone taking on a solemn edge. I have come this time with another important matter that requires your immediate attention. Seeing the plane master's expression turn grave, Kong Deming immediately focused his mind, bowed his head and stood at attention. Please give your orders, exalted one. Deming would not hesitate to give his life. Lei Chen did not beat around the bush and issued the directive directly. Unseal and retrieve all the war-grade spirit tools that your Sun Moon Empire has accumulated over thousands of years for the purpose of unifying the continent. Use them to arm all the spirit masters across the entire continent. What? Arm all the spirit masters across the continent? Even with Kong Deming's resolute will and vast experience, he couldn't help but be stunned upon hearing this, his face a mask of astonishment and confusion. For thousands of years, the Sun Moon Empire and the original three kingdoms of the Douluo Continent had been in a state of confrontation, with constant friction. Although surface peace was maintained, in the shadows, they never ceased thinking about restoring their former glory and unifying the continent. Over these millennia, especially after the Great War defeat over 4,000 years ago, the Sun Moon Empire had endured hardships, devoting the vast majority of its resources to the research, development, and production of spirit tools. In particular, the stockpile of various high-destructive power war-grade spirit tools had long reached astronomical numbers, sufficient to arm a sole engineer corps, far exceeding the size of their nominal standing army in a short period. These reserves were the Sun Moon Empire's greatest trump card and the very foundation for realizing their future ambitions. Now, the Plane Master was actually demanding that they take out this painstakingly accumulated family fortune to arm their potential enemies, the spirit masters of the original three kingdoms of the Douluo Continent. This was simply. Kong Deming took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the storm of shock in his heart, and couldn't help but ask, Exalted One, forgive this junior's dullness, but this move, actually arming all the continent's spirit masters. Why, could it be that these spirit tools accumulated by our Sun Moon Empire have another purpose? Lei Chen's gaze was profound, as if piercing through the dome of the Hall of Worship to see the threat approaching from the depths of space. He said in a heavy tone, the reason is simple. Before long, a great war concerning the very survival of this plane will erupt. This war is not internal strife, but an invasion from outside the plane. Its scale will engulf the entire plane, no one will be spared. He looked at Kong Deming and continued, at that time, the entire power of the plane must be gathered. Internal conflicts are utterly meaningless in the face of such an existential crisis. I need you to transform this accumulated strength into the shield and spear of the entire plane. Hearing the phrases plane survival and external invasion, Kong Deming's pupils contracted sharply. He instantly understood the severity of the matter far exceeded his imagination. For the Plane Master to personally appear with a warning and demand the consolidation of the entire continent's power, just how terrifying must the enemy be? Before Kong Deming could fully digest this astonishing news, Lei Chen had already given the specific targets. I am aware of your Sun Moon Empire's reserves. With their stockpiles, you must arm at least 10 top-tier corps equivalent in configuration to your Empire's most elite Beast King-level Soul Engineer Corps. As for the next tier, the standard for ordinary Soul Engineer Corps, you must arm 50. Given the richness of your inventory and the base number of spirit masters from the original three kingdoms of the Douluo Continent, achieving this goal should be more than sufficient. Kong Deming quickly calculated in his mind. The Beast King-level Soul Engineer Corps was the Sun Moon Empire's ace. Each one was equipped with a large number of high-grade spirit tools of rank 7 and above, even including some rank 9 soul tools. Their members were at least elite spirit masters of Spirit King rank and above. Their combat power was sufficient to confront head-on, even crush, several super Douluos. Forging a single Beast King-level Soul Engineer Corps was immensely costly. Their Sun Moon Empire only had 4 in total, and now the Plane Master was asking for 10 of equivalent specifications. Plus 50 ordinary Soul Engineer Corps. This would indeed require mobilizing almost all of the Sun Moon Empire's strategic reserves. In the past, due to the limited number of spirit masters in the Sun Moon Empire, a vast number of spirit tools could only be sealed away in warehouses. But if they included the other spirit masters from the original three kingdoms of the Douluo Continent, the number of spirit masters would instantly multiply several times over, sufficient to maximize the utility of these stockpiled war-grade spirit tools. 10 top-tier Soul Engineer Corps, 50 ordinary ones. Kong Deming murmured the numbers again, his gaze gradually turning resolute. If there truly was a plane-level war, then concentrating forces to face the external threat together was the only choice. Moreover, if they could use this opportunity to spread the Sun-Moon Empire's spirit tool system across the entire continent, it might not be entirely disadvantageous for the Sun-Moon Empire's position in the post-war New Order. He took a deep breath, bowed, and accepted the command. This junior understands. I shall respectfully obey the Exalted One's decree. I will immediately report to His Majesty the Emperor, open all strategic warehouses, and simultaneously contact Shrek, the body sect, and the original 3 kingdoms of the Douluo Continent to coordinate spirit master forces, and complete the armament and reorganization as soon as possible. Seeing Kong Deming adapt so quickly, a flicker of satisfaction passed through Lei Chen's eyes. Once this force was armed, the long-range firepower support for the lower-tier battlefields in the upcoming planar war would be secured. If the long-range firepower was sufficiently fierce, it could minimize the need for brutal close-quarters combat with the enemy, thereby reducing casualties among the living beings of their plane. And if close-quarters combat became unavoidable, requiring a wall of flesh to hold the line, wasn't there Electrolux's undead space? An endless army of undead was the perfect resource for attrition. A war between 2 planes, unless the disparity in strength was so great as to decide the outcome with a single strike, would ultimately evolve into a protracted war of attrition, testing reserves and willpower. In a protracted war of mutual attrition, they would swallow the energy and laws of the opposing plane bit by bit, until the accumulated advantage reached a critical point, allowing them to completely overwhelm the opponent and achieve the final assimilation. Chapter 61, Arrangements Made, First Probe into the Abyss. Lei Chen's words struck Kong Deming's heart like heavy war drums. A war for the survival of a plane, an invasion from beyond the domain, these concepts far exceeded any continental hegemony or sectarian grudges he had ever contemplated. But coming from the mouth of the plane master, their veracity was beyond doubt. That weighty pressure instantly replaced the joy he had just felt from forging the divine artifact and seeing a clear path ahead. 10 top-tier Soul Engineer Core, 50 standard Soul Engineer Core. This junior understands. Kong Deming took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the shock within, his gaze sharpening once more with focus. As the pillar of the Sun-Moon Empire, he knew well this was no time for hesitation. To integrate the spirit master forces of the entire continent, to mobilize all the Empire's reserves. This junior will spare no effort to complete the armed reorganization as swiftly as possible to face the great calamity. Lei Chen gave a slight nod, acknowledging Kong Deming's resolve. Yet he knew well the difficulty of this task. It could not be achieved by a mere decree alone. After all, the 3 kingdoms of the original Douluo Continent and the Sun-Moon Empire had been locked in confrontation for millennia, with deep-seated grievances and almost zero trust between them. Abruptly demanding they accept armaments from the Sun-Moon Empire and obey a unified schedule was bound to invite immense skepticism and resistance. Thus Lei Chen spoke again, his voice even but carrying an unquestionable authority. This matter concerns the very survival of the plane. Internal discord must be set aside for now. To ensure the plan proceeds smoothly and avoid pointless disputes and delays, I grant you a mark. With that, Lei Chen lightly tapped a finger. A nearly imperceptible stream of multicolored light, brimming with the vast will of the plane, flowed from his fingertip and silently merged into the center of Kong Deming's forehead. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribers, and share to AI Otaku Studio. Kong Deming felt a cool sensation on his brow, followed instantly by a connection of warm, immense will to his soul. It was as if a pair of supreme eyes were watching over him, bestowing unparalleled authority. He instinctively perceived that a new, extremely subtle, yet profoundly mysterious multicolored runic mark now adorned his mental interface, emitting a soft, gentle radiance. This mark contains a wisp of my will, Lei Chen stated plainly. When you need to gather the various factions to state the stakes, if anyone questions your words or my decree, you may reveal this mark. It will prove to the doubters that your words are true, that you represent my will. Greatly reassured, Kong Deming promptly bowed. My thanks, Your Eminence. With this mark in hand, this junior will surely convince all parties and complete the integration swiftly. With this imperial sword in hand, he would have the strongest confidence when facing representatives from Shrek Academy, the Body Sect, and the Star Luo, Tianhun, and Duling kingdoms. The will of the plane master was not something any individual or force could defy, especially at such a critical juncture of life and death. There's no time to waste. Go and make the arrangements promptly, Lei Chen gave his final instruction. Seeing that all matters had been conveyed, he said no more. A faint multicolored glow shimmered around him, as Lei Chen's figure seemed to merge into the void, gradually fading, until he vanished completely from the alchemy laboratory within the hall of worship. Watching Lei Chen depart, Kong Deming's taut nerves relaxed slightly, only to be replaced by an even heavier pressure. He raised a hand and lightly touched the warm mark on his brow, sensing the will contained within, and let out a long, slow exhale. A planar war, this was no longer the Empire's thousand-year grand plan, but the ultimate test concerning whether all living beings on this land beneath their feet could continue to survive. As one of the plan's specific executors, his responsibility was immense. Absolutely cannot delay, Kong Deming murmured to himself, his gaze becoming unshakably firm. Must act immediately. He straightened his slightly disheveled robes and withdrew the newly ascended divine artifact, the Silver Moon Divine Light Shield, into his body to nurture it. Now, the joy brought by this new divine artifact was overshadowed by a tremendous sense of mission. It would become a vital force protecting the plane on future battlefields. First to see the Emperor. Without further delay, Kong Deming moved, transforming into a streak of light that shot directly toward the core area of the Sun Moon Imperial Palace. He needed to immediately have an audience with the Emperor, to convey the decree of the plane master and the impending terrifying crisis, and to activate the Empire's highest-level war mobilization mechanism. Simultaneously, in the Empire's name, he would issue the most urgent summons to all major forces across the continent to discuss the plan for survival. Elsewhere, Lei Chen, having left the Sun Moon Empire's Hall of Worship, had already returned to the depths of the Sea of Plane Origin. At its core, surrounded by swirling multicolored light, his true form hovered quietly, as if breathing as one with the entire plane. The arrangements just made for Kong Deming were another crucial piece he had placed on the board within the plane to counter the abyssal invasion. The outcome of the low-tier battlefield, while seemingly inconsequential to the confrontation of peak combatants, was akin to two giants wrestling. The stability of the foundation beneath their feet directly determined who could hold out until the end. Arming a powerful soul engineer army, combined with Electrolux's ocean of undead, would be enough to hold the line in a protracted war of attrition, even gradually eroding the abyss's power. Shifting the balance of strength would ultimately break the stalemate. The urgent internal arrangements are largely set. The growth of the ice and snow empresses, the revival of Electrolux, the reformation and arming of the human spirit master system. The seeds have been sown. Now we need only wait for them to grow, or be tempered in the fires of war. Lei Chen pondered, meticulously reviewing all the arrangements within the plane, confirming there were no major oversights for the moment. Immediately, his gaze turned once more beyond the plane. The abyss plane, clinging like a persistent parasite, constantly approaching with its aura of greed and destruction, remained his greatest concern. To know oneself and the enemy is the key to victory in 100 battles. Relying solely on long-distance perception made it difficult to grasp the full picture, especially the specific state of that abyssal Saint Lord and the current detailed distribution of strength within the abyss plane. Thinking this, a flash of resolve crossed Lei Chen's eyes. He needed a closer look at this approaching enemy. With a thought, an energy avatar quietly separated from his body. This avatar contained a wisp of Lei Chen's divine sense, and enough divine power to exist and act within the cosmic void. The next moment, this energy avatar transformed into an intangible stream of light, instantly piercing through the Douluo Plane's sturdy world barrier, silently entering the cold, dark, silent depths of cosmic space. The avatar glanced back at Douluo Star, radiating vibrant life and protected by a thin yet tenacious planar barrier. Then it turned, accelerating to its limit. Like a fish swimming through water, it streaked towards the source of that heart-palpitating aura of destruction, the abyss plane. He was going to see for himself exactly how prepared this malicious neighbor, drawn here by Tang San, currently was. The prelude to this war, which would decide the fate of the Douluo Plane, had slowly begun to rise. Chapter 62, First Meeting with the Saint Lord, each with their own hidden agenda. The cold, lifeless depths of the cosmos resembled an endless black curtain, dotted with distant and dim stars. The Douluo Plane hung suspended like a dazzling, vibrant pearl, bursting with life. Opposite it, the Abyss Plane, emanating an aura of greed, destruction, and chaos, loomed like a vast, writhing shadow intent on devouring the light, approaching at a constant speed. Lei Chen's energy avatar transformed into a nearly imperceptible stream of multicolored light, streaking through the void. He made no deliberate effort to conceal his presence. After all, the purpose of this trip was reconnaissance and observation. If the other party couldn't even detect his uncloaked approach, then the threat level of this Abyss Plane would need a serious reassessment. Just as his avatar was still a considerable distance from the Abyss Plane, only now clearly sensing the chaotic fluctuations emanating from its planar barrier, a reaction came from the other side, as expected. A ripple suddenly appeared on the dark, murky planar barrier, which seemed to be condensed from countless negative energies. In the next moment, a profound, dark purple stream of light, as if capable of absorbing all illumination, shot out from it like an arrow from a bow, its target unmistakably Lei Chen's avatar. Within the avatar, Lei Chen's true consciousness stirred slightly. Perception is fairly sharp. Although this avatar was not his true body, it contained a wisp of his divine sense and the unique aura of a plane master, accompanied by the laws of reality as it moved. For the other party to lock onto and react to it so swiftly from such a vast distance was indeed a testament to formidable perception. In the flash of a thought, that dark purple stream of light had torn through the void and arrived abruptly, stopping in the emptiness about 100 zhang away from Lei Chen's avatar. The light dissipated, revealing a figure within. It was a man clad in ornate, dark purple robes. His face appeared quite young, even carrying a hint of sinister handsomeness. His purple hair floated gently in the void as if alive. His pupils were strange vertical slits, glowing with a dark golden hue. Within their openings and closings, scenes of countless planes being born and perishing, and the wails of living beings seemed to flow. The aura emanating from his entire being was obscure yet powerful, carrying a majesty that seemed to transcend all living things. This was the ruler of the Abyss Plane, the Abyssal Saint Lord. However, with just a sweeping glance, Lei Chen had already seen through the reality of the situation. Quite cautious indeed. This Abyssal Saint Lord before him, like Lei Chen, had not come in person. He, too, was merely an avatar condensed from pure energy and will. A plane master could only mobilize the full power of their plane, unleashing 100% or even greater strength, while residing within their own domain. Once their true body left their plane and entered the perilous depths of the cosmos, not only would their power be greatly diminished, but if ambushed or caught in an accident, it could lead to a loss of status or even their demise. Lei Chen's decision to come with an avatar wasn't without a hint of fishing intent. If he could lure the other's true body into impulsively leaving the Abyss Plane, it would be a heaven-sent opportunity. Unfortunately, this Abyssal Saint Lord was clearly well versed in such tactics as well, sending only an avatar to the meeting. His caution and cunning were evident. As Lei Chen's thoughts raced, analyzing his opponent, a smile appeared on the face of the Abyssal Saint Lord's avatar. It seemed gentle on the surface, but contained boundless hypocrisy. He gave a slight nod. His voice, transmitted through the void, carried a strange magnetism, as if capable of bewitching the heart. "I am the Abyssal Saint Lord. I apologize for not welcoming our esteemed guest from afar." The words seemed polite, but within those dark golden vertical pupils, there was not a trace of apology, only cold scrutiny and a hint of barely concealed grade, as if appraising prey soon to be within his grasp. Lei Chen's avatar remained expressionless, showing no reaction to this hypocritical courtesy. He simply stared deeply at the Abyssal Saint Lord, his gaze sharp as a blade, as if trying to pierce through the surface of this avatar to glimpse the secrets at the core of its true body. After a moment, he cut straight to the point, his voice calm yet carrying an indisputable chill. "Since your plane's forces are already pressing upon our borders, advancing directly toward my realm, it seems you are determined to have a confrontation with us." Seeing Lei Chen so direct, the smile on the Abyssal Saint Lord's face remained unchanged, his tone still dripping with falsehood. "Heh, our guest speaks too gravely. Planes sailing through the boundless cosmos, their meeting is fate. I have brought the Abyss Plane here not with ill intent, but because I sense this plane's vibrant life and immense potential. I wish to coexist amicably with your esteemed plane, to seek mutual development and elevate together hand in hand. I hope our guest does not misunderstand our sincere intentions." Sincere intentions. A scornful curve appeared at the corner of Lei Chen's avatar's mouth. Spare me the pretense. Your plane's essence, to devour all and destroy everything, cannot be hidden from me. Whether it's a misunderstanding, you and I both know the truth. He paused, meeting the abyssal Saint Lord's gaze as the smile gradually faded from the other's face, and continued, however, there is one thing you said that wasn't wrong. I also believe that if two planes could merge into one, complementing each other's strengths and weaknesses, it would be greatly beneficial for both. As these words fell, the last trace of that hypocritical smile finally vanished completely from the abyssal Saint Lord's face. His dark golden vertical pupils narrowed slightly, dangerous light flashing within the slits. He naturally understood the implication in Lei Chen's words. Far from cowering in fear, the other party harbored the same ambition, actually wanting to turn the tables and devour the abyss plane. Is that so? The abyssal Saint Lord's voice turned cold, devoid of any previous courtesy, carrying a hint of menace. Since our ideas are so aligned, then it seems nothing could be better. The law of the cosmos is survival of the fittest. It has always been so. Lei Chen's avatar said no more. The probing was done, the stance made clear. He took one last deep look at the abyssal Saint Lord's avatar, where killing intent now lurked, and left with a final remark. In that case, we shall each rely on our own abilities. I hope you will not regret today's decision in the future. Of course, by then, even if you wish to regret, you likely will no longer have the chance. Before the words had fully faded, Lei Chen's energy avatar instantly grew transparent like a candle flame in the wind, then transformed into a wisp of pure, multicolored light. This wisp of multicolored light, as if drawn by an invisible force, shot toward the distant Douluo Plane at a speed several times faster than its arrival. In the blink of an eye, it vanished into the faint yet resilient planar barrier and disappeared. The abyssal Saint Lord's avatar did not attempt to stop it. He merely hovered in the void, watching coldly as that strand of light returned to the Douluo Plane. Only after the multicolored light had completely vanished did an unconcealed look of mockery and an icy, bone-chilling sneer appear on his face. Regret, a clueless fool, he muttered to himself, his voice filled with condescending contempt. You have no idea what you and your feeble plane are about to face, what it truly is. The dark purple avatar then slowly dissipated, returning to the abyss plane. Only the cold, lifeless cosmic depths remained, but the invisible yet immensely heavy will to fight between the two great planes had already spread through the void like a tangible force. Chapter 63, The Abyss Plane's Trump Card, the Crimson Domain. Elsewhere, the wisp of energy that Lei Chen had separated, carrying a sliver of his consciousness, traversed the cold, silent depths of the cosmos. Like a weary bird returning to its nest, it silently merged back into his main body, which sat cross-legged at the very core of the Sea of Plane Origin. The Sea of Origin, shimmering with a kaleidoscope of flowing light, rippled gently. Lei Chen slowly opened his eyes, which had been tightly shut. Within those eyes, deep as the starry sea, a trace of imperceptible gravity now flickered. The brief exchange just now with the abyssal Saint Lord's avatar, though consisting of only a few words, contained far more information and hidden contention than what appeared on the surface. Something's not right, Lei Chen murmured softly, his voice echoing in the empty vastness of the Sea of Origin. Although the prior exchange was brief, he had still discerned many clues. The strangest among them was the attitude the abyssal Saint Lord had just displayed, a confidence that bordered on certainty, an extraordinary self-assurance. When facing Lei Chen, a fellow plane master who was also a first-rank deity, the abyssal Saint Lord's demeanor was far too composed. Especially after Lei Chen explicitly expressed his intention to merge into one, and his desire to counter-devour the abyssal Saint Lord's reaction was not one of furious indignation at being provoked, nor cautious deliberation after weighing the pros and cons. Instead, it was a kind of cold indifference tinged with mockery and pity. It was as if he had long anticipated Lei Chen's reaction and was utterly unconcerned by it, as if all of Lei Chen's struggles were within his calculations, and he had absolute certainty that he could subdue the protagonist. This abnormal confidence undoubtedly put Lei Chen on high alert. Wars between planes are like battles between colossal beasts, where scale is often one of the key factors determining victory. Based on Lei Chen's perception and judgment, the Douluo plane he currently controlled, having undergone the fusion with the undead demiplane and the continuous strengthening of its life origin, should have a slightly greater overall scale and developmental potential than the abyss plane, which was filled with an aura of destruction and chaos. and the scale of a plane directly correlates to the strength of its lord. Logically, when facing an opponent of the same level while not having an advantage in scale, or even being at a slight disadvantage, the Abyssal Saint Lord should not act so presumptuously, even if he didn't show fear. Where does he get such confidence? Lei Chen sank into contemplation, his fingers unconsciously tapping the void, sending out faint ripples of lore. Could it be? The Abyss Plane is hiding some trump card unknown to me. His thoughts racing, Lei Chen began carefully reviewing all the information he knew about the Abyss Plane. The Abyssal Saint Lord, a first-level god, wielded the super-divine artifact, the Heavenly Saint Abyss-splitting halberd. This halberd possessed extremely formidable attack power and the ability to ignore defenses, posing a significant threat. Under his command were over 100 layers of the Abyss, each guarded by an Abyssal King. The strength of these kings roughly ranged from the human limit Douluo level to the semi-divine level. They were numerous and formed the core force. But aside from this, the Abyss Plane seemingly had no other divine-level entities on the surface. While these forces are not to be underestimated, with Electrolux, a second-level god, aiding me and the internal power of the Spirit Masters being rapidly integrated and armed, they are not insurmountable. Even if the Saint Lord can contend with me using the Heavenly Saint Abyss-splitting halberd, once Electrolux finishes clearing out the Abyssal Kings, he can join me to surround the Saint Lord. The odds of victory would still be in my favor, Lei Chen assessed coolly. So then, what is the variable that allows the Saint Lord to be so brazenly confident? A single term flashed through Lei Chen's mind like lightning: the Crimson Domain. The Abyss Plane was not born from nothing. It was a subsidiary plane formed when the higher-level plane, the Crimson Domain, separated out roughly 40% of its energy. Tracing its roots, the Abyssal Saint Lord's power was intricately connected to the Crimson Domain. If the Abyss Plane's invasion this time was not a solo endeavor, but had the covert support of its parent entity, the Crimson Domain, or even, if the Crimson Domain was lurking nearby, then the situation would be completely different. A Crimson Domain capable of separating 40% of its energy to create a first-level god and a vast Abyss Plane, how powerful must its true form be? If the Crimson Domain truly was backing him from behind, then the Saint Lord's confidence made sense. With the existence of the Crimson Domain as his backing, the Saint Lord naturally had the confidence to disregard the Douluo Plane's slight advantage in scale, viewing Lei Chen's resistance as a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Just contemplating this possibility made even Lei Chen, with his steady mental state, frown slightly. With his current strength, facing the Abyss Plane one-on-one, he had over a 70% chance of victory, counter-devouring it and causing the Douluo Plane's foundation to surge. But if he had to add the Crimson Domain to the equation, forget counter-devouring, even protecting the Douluo Plane under the assault of two planes would become an uncertainty. The Crimson Domain, if it truly intervenes, then the nature of this war will be completely different. Lei Chen's gaze grew razor-sharp. The flow of kaleidoscopic light around him seemed to accelerate, revealing the turbulence within. However, this gravity did not last long. Lei Chen's gaze seemed to pierce through layers of spatial barriers, landing on that Dragon Valley small world attached to the main Douluo Plane, emanating a faint draconic might. There, the Silver Dragon King was immersed in a deep slumber, repairing the Dao wounds accumulated over countless ages. However, when it comes to trump cards, it's not only your abyss that possesses them. A cold arc slowly curved at the corner of Lei Chen's mouth. The Silver Dragon King was one half of the Dragon God. Even if her strength had not recovered to its peak, she was far beyond comparable to an ordinary first-level god. She was Lei Chen's greatest reliance, the foundation of his confidence to look towards the divine realm and plan for the future. If it truly came to a crisis of survival, with the Abyss and the Crimson Domain joining forces to press the attack, forcing him to resort to his ultimate measure, then awakening the Silver Dragon King would be the key to breaking the deadlock. Lei Chen plus the Silver Dragon King, facing the Abyssal Saint Lord and the Mother of the Crimson Domain, it was not a fight they couldn't win. In fact, if they could seize the opportunity and completely annihilate these invading enemies, the benefits gained from devouring their plane origins would far exceed those from the Abyss Plane alone. The moment he remembered that behind him stood the Silver Dragon King, an absolute trump card capable of overturning the entire battlefield, the gloom that had just risen in Lei Chen's heart dissipated greatly. His tense spirit relaxed accordingly. Let soldiers come, we have generals to block them. Let water flow, we have earth to dam it. regardless of what trump card the Abyss might be hiding, whether the Saint Lord was bluffing or truly had the Crimson Domain as his backing. At worst, they would simply have to fight it out with real blades and spears. Enough, overthinking is useless. Lei Chen closed his eyes again, sinking his consciousness into the operation of the plane origin, accelerating the progress of various internal plans. The energy of the Abyss plane, I will devour it. If that Crimson Domain insists on getting involved, then I'll devour it along with the Abyss. A fierce fighting spirit, mingled with the supreme majesty of a plane master, quietly began to permeate the Sea of Origin. Chapter 64, Sharpening the Blades, Dubussy's Divine Ascension Through the Flesh. After that brief but covertly tense long-distance confrontation with the Abyssal Saint Lord, Lei Chen did not undertake any further grand, public actions. Like a composed chess player, he fell silent after making his move, submerging the vast majority of his consciousness into the Sea of Plane Origin. Acting as the most efficient hub, he quietly coordinated the operation of various internal plans across the plane. The entire Douluo Plane, under an atmosphere of outward calm and inner tension, resembled a war machine beginning its full pre-battle warm-up. Every gear, driven by an invisible will, turned with unprecedented efficiency. Ever since Lei Chen personally visited the Sun Moon Empire's Hall of Worship and issued that earth-shattering decree, the continent's situation had completely entered a channel of high-speed transformation. When the Sun Moon Empire's imperial family, using the highest-grade confidential letters, delivered the Plane Master's warnings about the invasion of powerful enemies from beyond the domain and the war for the plane's survival, along with the demand to arm all spirit masters across the continent, to the imperial families of the Star Luo, Tianhan and Duling kingdoms, as well as top forces like Shrek Academy and the Body Sect, the resulting shockwave was nothing short of a tsunami. The initial reaction was almost universally one of disbelief and intense skepticism. However, when Kong Deming, following Lei Chen's command, personally carried the Plane Master's 7-colored mark across borders, appearing successively in the three kingdoms' imperial capitals, Shrek City, and the Body Sect's mountain gate to provide verification, all doubts and clamor fell into a deathly silence before the vast, abyssal, and indisputable will of the plane emanating from that mark. It was a tremor and reverence stemming from the depths of the soul. Any spirit master who had reached a certain level could clearly perceive the supreme authority that mark represented. Question the will of the Plane Master. No one dared to bear the consequences of such an act, nor did anyone believe the Sun Moon Empire possessed the audacity or capability to forge such a divine miracle. Thus, under immense survival pressure, a consensus was reached at a speed beyond imagination. Although millennia of estrangement and hostility could not vanish instantly, under the overwhelming baton of the plane's continued existence, all factions had no choice but to temporarily set aside their disputes and embark on an unprecedented emergency cooperation. Haggling and nitpicking at the negotiation table were inevitable. After confirming the authenticity of the crisis, the primary goals for the three kingdoms of the original Douluo Continent were securing their share of command authority over the Joint Soul Engineer Corps and the distribution plan for resources. Meanwhile, the Sun Moon Empire firmly held control over the core of spirit tool technology and the distribution rights for stockpiled equipment. Representatives from both sides engaged in fierce verbal battles at the conference table, neither yielding an inch. The atmosphere was often tense and hostile. During this period, small-scale conflicts erupted between border legions belonging to different countries due to historical grievances, and some major sects attempted to exploit the chaos for greater gain. However, whenever negotiations reached an impasse or uncontrollable trouble erupted below, the 7-colored mark between Kong Deming's eyebrows would grow slightly warm, and an intangible pressure would spread, reminding all participants of who the true enemy was. The will of the Plane Master acted like a sword suspended overhead, forcibly correcting the deviating course time and again. Ultimately, a cumbersome yet relatively fair cooperative framework was forcibly established. A joint command headquarters would be formed with representatives from all parties. The Sun Moon Empire would provide all equipment and technical guidance, while the three kingdoms of the original Douluo Continent would contribute based on the quantity and quality of the spirit masters, jointly forming a combined army. As massive strategic warehouses brimming with defensive spirit tools were thrown open within the Sun Moon Empire's borders, a torrent of steel, vast quantities of standardized spirit tools, fixed-load spirit tool artillery shells, linked spirit tool array bases, and other war supplies, began flowing continuously through emergency-secured channels to designated locations. The three kingdoms of the original Douluo Continent also demonstrated astonishing mobilization capabilities. Under the coordination of their imperial families and major forces, various sects, noble private armies, and even wandering spirit masters were rapidly organized into groups and underwent emergency training under Sun-Moon Empire Soul engineers. In this process, both sides were secretly alarmed. The Sun-Moon Empire's High Command, looking at the intelligence reports summarizing the total number of spirit masters mobilized by the three kingdoms, especially the high-level spirit masters hidden by sects that usually kept a low profile, could not help but gasp in shock. They deeply realized that without the Plane Master's intervention to integrate them, a war would have been extremely brutal, even with their spirit tool advantage. Meanwhile, representatives from Luo, Tianhun, and other kingdoms, upon witnessing the mountains of high-level spirit tools stockpiled in the Sun-Moon Empire's warehouses, many of which they had never even seen before, especially samples of terrifyingly powerful 9th-rank fixed-load spirit tool artillery shells and spirit tool fortification technology far beyond their imagination, broke out in a cold sweat. They finally understood the terrifying power the Sun-Moon Empire had accumulated through millennia of restraint. If truly unleashed in an internal war, the three kingdoms' defenses would likely have been riddled with holes. Regardless of the undercurrents and lingering fears during the process, before the final deadline set by the Plane Master, 10 top-tier Soul Engineer Corps, well-equipped, with members consisting of at least Spirit Saint level or higher Spirit Masters, and outfitted with the latest linked Spirit Tool artillery arrays and flight Spirit Tools, along with 50 standard Soul Engineer Corps, mainly composed of Spirit King and Spirit Emperor level Spirit Masters. With equipment similarly far surpassing the original standards of any kingdom, finally took preliminary shape and began intensive integrated combat drills. The density of long-range Spirit Tool artillery fire was sufficient to create a devastating metallic storm over preset positions, providing crucial long-range firepower support for the potential low-end battlefields of the future plane war. At the level of core strength, the Douluo Plane also witnessed breakthrough progress. The ice and fire yin-yang well, that treasure trove of heaven and earth under Lei Chen's will, became the ultimate aid for top experts to break through their bottlenecks. Among them, the body sex leader, Douluo, in that uniquely advantageous environment, and combining the profound mysteries of their innate secret method, after over a year of arduous cultivation, finally tempered his physical body to its absolute limit. On this day, within the valley of the ice and fire yin-yang well, Douluo's mountain-like, robust frame trembled violently. The blood and vital energy throughout his body surged and roared like mighty rivers. His skin's surface revealed a bronze, immortal luster, and every muscle seemed to contain the power to split mountains and part seas. A majestic pressure, far surpassing the level of a limit Douluo, soared into the sky, churning the waters of the ice and fire springs. Ha heard the innate secret method, divine ascension through the flesh. I've finally done it. Douluo threw his head back and roared with laughter, the sound shaking the surroundings. He had successfully forged a true divine body, stepping into the demigod realm. At this moment, relying solely on the power of his physical body, he was already capable of shaking heaven and earth. Only the final step remained before the dreamt-of level 100 divine rank, the transformation of his mental power into divine sense. Once accomplished, he would become the first truly divine-level human expert in the current plane to achieve it through his own cultivation. Sensing the vast aura of Douluo's successful breakthrough, Mu-En Yizishui, Long Xiaorao, and others cultivating in the same valley all revealed complex emotions in their eyes: envy, urgency, and a strong, newly ignited fighting spirit. Under the looming shadow of the plane war, every increase in strength meant one more shred of hope for survival. The entire Douluo Plane, under intangible pressure, was sharpening its claws and fangs at an unprecedented speed, quietly awaiting the arrival of that collision destined to rewrite fate. Chapter 65, The Second Demigod, Tempering the Sword with Tribulation Lightning. Just as Douluo successfully forged a divine body and stepped into the realm of a demigod at the ice and fire yin-yang well through their innate secret method, adding a towering pillar to the pinnacle of human combat strength, the strongest among the spirit beasts on the other side of the Douluo Plane also welcomed a crucial breakthrough. Deep within the Eternal Ice Palace, at the heart of the extreme Northland, Snow Empress sat cross-legged upon a bed of cold jade marrow, the aura emanating from her having already reached a critical point. Her originally peerlessly beautiful and aloof countenance now carried an added touch of divinity and majesty. Her ice-blue hair moved without wind, each strand seemingly condensed from the purest ultimate ice, flowing with a faint, luminous glow. After nearly a year of relentless, arduous cultivation, and having refined a full 18 pieces of 10,000-year profound ice marrow, her already vast cultivation base of 800,000 years had finally accumulated the immense foundation necessary to charge towards the 900,000-year barrier. Ahead lies the chasm of 900,000 years. Snow Empress slowly opened her eyes, a flicker of determination flashing within her ice-blue pupils. For ordinary spirit beasts, the 900,000-year bottleneck could be called hopeless. Even the one hailed as the beast god, Dai Tian, had not yet reached this step. But she was different. She not only possessed the uniquely gifted bloodline of ultimate ice, but also had resources bestowed by the Plane Master, resources capable of defying fate, the 10,000-year profound ice marrow. Relying on such a supreme treasure of heaven and earth, bottlenecks in her cultivation advancement were almost non-existent. She only needed to methodically refine and accumulate, progressing steadily at the terrifying speed of increasing her cultivation by nearly 10,000 years per month. Breaking through to 900,000 years was, for her, not a question of success or failure, but an inevitable outcome that would come naturally when conditions were ripe. With her mind made up, Snow Empress hesitated no longer. She took out a new piece of 10,000-year profound ice marrow, formed hand seals with both hands, and the pure, vast ice attribute energy surged into her body like 100 rivers returning to the sea. Her aura, already at its peak, began to launch a final assault against that intangible barrier under the impetus of this newborn power. Boom! As if a river frozen for 10,000 years was shattered by a spring thunderclap, a deep yet clear sound of shattering came from within Snow Empress's body. In that instant, a pressure far more vast and colder than at 800,000 years erupted with her at the center. The entire ice palace trembled violently. The eternal ice covering the palace groaned under unbearable weight, even developing fine cracks. 900,000 years, a watershed in spirit beast cultivation, symbolizing truly stepping into the demigod domain. However, almost the instant Snow Empress succeeded in her breakthrough, a sudden change occurred in the sky above the extreme north land. The originally greyish horizon gathered heart-palpitating, lead grey clouds at a visible speed. These were no ordinary rain clouds. Their colour was ink black, so thick they seemed to press down the entire firmament. Within the clouds, purple-red lightning danced wildly like dragons and serpents, emitting low, terrifying rumbles. A destructive, heavenly pressure abruptly descended, locking onto Snow Empress below, who had just broken through. The intensity of this pressure far surpassed the heavenly tribulation she experienced at 800,000 years. It even sent a bone-chilling shiver from the depths of her soul to Snow Empress, who had just confidently stepped into the demigod level. Is this the heavenly tribulation of 900,000 years? Snow Empress looked up at the sky, unprecedented gravity appearing for the first time on her peerlessly beautiful face. She could clearly sense that the energy level condensed within those tribulation clouds had completely transcended the mortal realm, reaching the true, divine level. This was not strange. It was the embodiment of the most brutal law on the spirit-beast cultivation path. The heavenly tribulation of spirit beasts was fundamentally different from the test-like tribulations other beings might attract, which could contain a sliver of life. It was a pure, malicious mechanism of destruction. Its sole purpose was to obliterate any spirit beast attempting to defy the heavens and challenge the limits of life. Precisely because of this, the power of a spirit beast's heavenly tribulation would always far exceed the spirit beast's actual current cultivation level. When a spirit beast possessed the strength of a super Douluo, the heavenly tribulation would have the might of a limit Douluo. When a spirit beast reached the level of a limit Douluo, the heavenly tribulation would escalate to the demigod level. And once a spirit beast, like Snow Empress, successfully advanced into the demigod domain, then the descending heavenly tribulation would, without exception, reach the divine energy level, ensuring complete annihilation. With Snow Empress's strength as a newly advanced demigod, facing a heavenly might that had reached the divine level, the outcome was almost certain: complete destruction of body and soul, with no chance of survival. Just as Snow Empress's mind was taut, preparing for a desperate fight, a calm and gentle voice quietly sounded beside her. "No need to be tense, just calmly stabilize your realm." The voice was not loud, yet it seemed to carry a strange magic, instantly calming the raging storm of fear in Snow Empress's heart. She turned her head abruptly to see Lei Chen had somehow quietly appeared within the ice palace. He stood with his hands behind his back, looking up at the divine-level tribulation, clouds constantly brewing and radiating destructive aura in the sky. Senior, Snow Empress's heart settled greatly, and she hurriedly bowed in greeting. With the Plane Master here, she need not worry, be it a divine-level heavenly tribulation or an even greater calamity. Lei Chen gave a slight nod, his gaze still fixed on the tribulation clouds above, as if appreciating a rare work of art. The spirit beast heavenly tribulation, the killing intent of the heavenly Tao, truly lives up to its reputation. Such pure destructive lightning is the best nourishment for tempering a sharp weapon. Before his words faded, the tribulation clouds high in the sky seemed to have finished gathering. Boom crack! A terrifying tribulation lightning, over 20 meters in diameter and resembling a purple-gold divine dragon, tore through the dark sky. Carrying the majestic divine might to annihilate all, it fiercely struck down towards the ice palace. Where it passed, space twisted, leaving behind shocking black cracks that took a long time to heal. Such was the might of a divine-level heavenly tribulation. Facing this destructive thunder dragon, formidable enough to make an ordinary divine-level expert take it seriously, Lei Chen merely calmly raised his right hand. In the next moment, the purple-gold lightning pattern between his eyebrows suddenly lit up. A broad-bladed heavy sword, entirely purple-gold and wreathed in electric light, materialized out of thin air. It was the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword. Go! Lei Chen uttered a soft command. The Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword emitted a clear, pleasant sword hum, transforming into a purple lightning dragon, instead of avoiding it. It actively charged towards that violent tribulation lightning. A bizarre scene occurred. The divine-level tribulation lightning, capable of destroying heaven and earth, did not cause a world-shaking explosion upon contacting the sword's body. Instead, it was greedily devoured and absorbed by the countless intricate, dense lightning patterns on the sword's surface, like mud oxen entering the sea. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Subtle yet dense sounds of electric current arose. The Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword, like a bottomless pit, completely absorbed that thick purple-gold thunder dragon from head to tail. The lightning radiance on the sword's body suddenly blazed intensely, its flow speed increased, and the sharp aura it emitted climbed at a perceptible rate. One strike devoured. Immediately after, the second, the third. As if enraged, the tribulation lightning strikes came, each thicker and deeper in color than the last, shifting from purple gold to dark gold, and finally even carrying faint threads of chaotic color, their power escalating layer by layer. However, no matter how the tribulation lightning changed, the outcome remained exactly the same. Under Lei Chen's control, the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword was like an elegant dancer, weaving through the thunderstorm. Wherever the sword passed, all tribulation lightning was devoured and refined, becoming nourishment to nurture itself. Watching from below, Snow Empress was dazzled, her heart filled with incomparable shock. This was hardly undergoing a tribulation. It was clearly the Plane Master, using the power of the heavenly tribulation to feed his own divine artifact. When the final dark black tribulation lightning strike, with power comparable to a full-force blow from a divine-level expert, was completely devoured by the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword, the thick, leaden tribulation clouds high in the sky seemed to have exhausted all their power and began to dissipate slowly, unwillingly. The Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword flew back into Lei Chen's hand. The sword's body remained simple and unadorned, but upon careful perception, one could discover that the thunder origin energy contained within had doubled. At the sword's edge, subtle black lines hinting at spatial severance flickered briefly. Its power had clearly begun to exceed that of an ordinary divine artifact, not far from the higher-grade, great divine artifact level. Lei Chen gently stroked the sword's body, feeling the surging power within, and nodded with satisfaction. Chapter 66, Planes Collide, War Begins. Feeling the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike sword in his palm, its thunder origin nearly doubled, and humming incessantly, after devouring Snow Empress's 900,000-year tribulation, a trace of unconcealable satisfaction flowed through Lei Chen's eyes. Purple gold lightning flowed and danced along the sword's body like living things. The naturally formed lightning patterns grew clearer and more profound, faintly exuding a sharp sword intent that seemed eager to tear through the heavens and judge all creation. The level of destructive energy it contained had already steadily surpassed that of an ordinary divine artifact, steadily advancing towards the higher tier he anticipated. At this rate, with just one or two more instances like this, the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike Sword's promotion to the great divine artifact level should be a natural progression, Lei Chen thought to himself, his fingertips brushing over the cool blade, sensing the surging power within. He even had a premonition that it might not take as long as a few times. When Snow Empress, having accumulated enough with the 10,000-year profound ice marrow, breaks through the million-year bottleneck in one go and officially steps into the divine realm, the heavenly tribulation that descends to carry out its extermination mission will undoubtedly be even more powerful. In all likelihood, it will reach the level of a second-rank deity's full strength. If he could completely devour that terrifying tribulation, whose total energy is equivalent to a second-level god, and use the pure destructive thunder origin within for a final tempering, then the Nine Heavens Thunderstrike Sword would have an excellent chance to achieve a qualitative leap, crossing the threshold into Great Divine Artifact in one fell swoop. A Great Divine Artifact is already the level of a primary combat weapon for a first-level deity. If he, Lei Chen, possessing the Super Divine Artifact, Guardian Armor of Living Beings, were to add a Great Divine Artifact level 9 Heavens Thunderstrike Sword, he would achieve a perfect balance of offense and defense, his combat system reaching completion. At that time, facing the Abyssal Saint Lord wielding the Heavenly Saint Abyss-splitting halberd, he would no longer be locked in a stalemate, but could instead gain a suppressing advantage, firmly seizing the initiative in the impending planar war, and even find an opportunity to severely wound him. Thinking of this, even with Lei Chen's mental fortitude, a sliver of anticipation couldn't help but arise. Every bit of improvement in strength concerned the survival of the plane and his future plans. However, just as his thoughts raced, deducing various future possibilities, an extremely intense spatial fluctuation, like a massive stone thrown into a calm lake, violently transmitted from outside the plane, instantly interrupting his train of thought. Lei Chen's gaze sharpened. He abruptly looked up, his vision seemingly piercing through the Douluo Plane's resilient yet intangible barrier, shooting straight into the boundless, cold depths of the cosmos. He saw that originally dark purple star radiating chaos and destruction, the Abyss Plane, which had been continuously approaching but always maintaining a certain distance, had now swollen several times in size and was almost face-to-face with the Douluo Plane. What made Lei Chen narrow his eyes even more was that the Abyss Plane's originally dark, eggshell-like outer barrier was now receding like a tide, actively dissipating for the most part, revealing the bizarre, layered, and terrifying scene within. It was charging towards the Douluo Plane with such unreserved, desperate madness. Going all in from the start, Lei Chen sneered coldly in his heart, instantly discerning the Abyssal Saint Lord's intention. In a planar war, the conventional method of invasion, like a cautious thief, usually involved first expending energy to construct a relatively stable spatial passage, like inserting a straw into the other plane, then dispatching vanguard forces to invade, gradually eroding the plane's origin, steady and sure. Although this method progressed slowly, its advantage lay in its prudence. Even if met with setbacks, losses could be minimized by sealing the passage. Yet the Abyss Plane's current action was extreme. It had abandoned all probing and groundwork, directly choosing the most savage, most violent method, planar adhesion. This meant completely letting down its own defenses, making the most direct contact and collision with the Douluo Plane's barrier. It was like two giants discarding all weapons and techniques to engage in the most primitive close-quarters brawl. Once the planar barriers of both sides made large-scale contact, countless temporary, yet extremely stable cross-boundary passages would naturally form. The war would instantly erupt comprehensively at every point of contact between the two planes, leaving no buffer zone whatsoever. This was clearly a gambler's tactic. Either you die or I perish, leaving no room for retreat. Faced with such a situation, Lei Chen actually had two choices before him. The first was resistance. Mobilize the Douluo Plane's origin power to forcibly stabilize and reinforce its own planar barrier, pushing back against the Abyss Plane's pressing momentum, or at least maintaining a safe distance. Doing so could avoid the immediate, full-scale outbreak of war, buying more time for internal adjustments and tactical deployment. However, the cost would be the continuous consumption of a massive amount of planar origin energy, and it would appear as passive defense, putting him at a disadvantage. The second was to go all in as well. If you Abyss dare to lower your barrier and press close, then I the Douluo Plane will also lower my barrier and meet you. So it's a clash of brute force. In that case, the two planes would become completely fused together, and the war would instantly turn white-hot. But the benefit was equally obvious. As long as they could crush the Abyss on the frontal battlefield, then when it came to counter-devouring the other plane's origin energy, it would become exceptionally smooth and efficient due to the barriers being fully open. It could be described as deciding the outcome in a single battle. Therefore, with almost no hesitation, a sharp glint flashed in Lei Chen's eyes as he made his decision. Since you seek a swift death, then I shall oblige. Retreat and hesitation were never Lei Chen's style. Ever since the Abyss Plane, guided by Tang San, cast its greedy gaze upon the Douluo Plane, this life-or-death planar war was already destined. The relationship between the two sides was, from the very beginning, an absolute zero-sum game with no room for compromise. So when it was time to act, Lei Chen would never hesitate. With his mind made up, Lei Chen no longer had the slightest hesitation. He instantly returned to the core of the Sea of Plane Origin, slowly spread his arms, and a radiant seven-colored divine light erupted from his entire being. Like an awakened emperor, he issued the most supreme war decree to his realm. The entire Douluo Plane, whether the vast oceans, the boundless continents, the skies, or the depths of the earth, all living beings clearly felt a faint tremor originating from the world's very core in the ground beneath their feet and their surroundings at this moment. Immediately after, under the astonished gazes of countless powerful beings, the Douluo Plane's intangible, formless barrier, which had always protected the life and laws within the plane, began to actively fade and dissipate like melting snow, rapidly receding in the direction of contact with the Abyss Plane. An unconcealed planar aura, brimming with vibrant vitality and solemn fighting spirit, like an unsheathed sharp sword, actively met the oncoming abyssal aura filled with destruction and greed. The two great planes collided together, with no barrier between them. An ultimate gamble that would sweep across two worlds and decide the fate of countless lives, officially began at this very instant. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribers, and share to AI Otaku Studio. Chapter 67, The Boundary as the Frontier, Gold as the Oath. The moment Lei Chen's will was issued, and the Douluo Plane's barrier actively dissipated, a soul-shaking roar originating from the very origin of the world erupted from the depths of the endless void. It was not a sound, but chaotic ripples stirred by the most direct, most brutal collision of law against law, matter against matter, energy against energy. The entire Douluo star trembled violently. Mountains shook, rivers and seas churned backward, and the sky seemed torn open by a massive, east-west spanning fissure. Through the tear one could see a bizarre world opposite, a world interwoven with dark reds and deep purples, brimming with an aura of destruction and chaos, the Abyss Plane. Two colossal planes, like two gigantic islands floating in the cosmos, were no-squeezing together in a manner that defied all reason. At the edges of contact, space shattered inch by inch, only to be forcibly kneaded together again under the unparalleled, immense power, erupting into terrifying storms capable of annihilating all existence below the divine level. Any ordinary being witnessing this scene would likely have their mind shattered instantly. However, as the master of the Douluo Plane, Lei Chen's gaze was as calm as eternal, unmelting black ice. He stood at the core of the Origin Sea, hands pressing down in a virtual gesture. Multicolored divine light erupted from his body with unprecedented intensity, like the most precise loom, giving the Douluo Plane's origin power. He was not blindly meeting the impact head-on, but exercising extremely meticulous control. He had indeed chosen a head-on collision, but it was by no means a mindless crash. If the two planes were allowed to fully converge, the hundreds of millions of ordinary people on the Douluo with no means of self-protection would immediately be exposed to the bloody maws of the Abyss creatures. That would be a one-sided slaughter and a foolish act of supplying the enemy. Therefore, under his precise control, the contact between the two great planes was not evenly distributed across the globe. Instead, the vast majority of the collision's immense force was guided and compressed towards the southern coastal region of the Douluo. Boom! A roar 100 million times more terrifying than the simultaneous explosion of 10 million thunderclaps came from the southern part of the Douluo. There, the heavens and earth seemed to be kneaded violently by an invisible giant hand. The land swelled, twisted, and compressed like maddened dough. Vast oceans were lifted into the air. Endless mountains, rocks, and soil surged from the depths of the earth, violently merging with the dark red matter stripped from the collision edge of the abyss plane, material imbued with chaotic energy. This was a display of creator-like, immense power. Under the horrified gazes of countless living beings, a mountain range of indescribable grandeur and scale rose from the ground at a visible speed, piercing straight into the clouds. The mountain range stretched for tens of thousands of miles, its height far surpassing any known peak in the world. Its summit had already pierced the atmosphere, entering the cold expanse of the starry sky. On one side of the mountain range lay the familiar scenery of the Douluo Plane. Although vegetation had been flattened by the cataclysm, vitality remained. On the other side was utter desolation and chaos. Jagged, dark red rocks formed bizarre shapes, and the air was thick with a nauseating stench of sulfur and decay. That was the territory of the abyss plane. This majestic mountain range spanning the southern end of the Douluo was the battlefield front line forged by Lei Chen with his supreme power, the new plane boundary formed after the collision of the two great planes. The moment the mountain range took shape, Lei Chen's gaze pierced through the void, landing on the other side of the boundary. There upon the dark red scorched earth, a dark, tide-like mass of abyss creatures had already completed their assembly. Abyss creatures of varied forms, exuding savage auras, roared deafeningly under the leadership of dozens of figures, radiating terrifying fluctuations at the level of limit Douluo, or even demigods, the abyssal kings of various layers. They transformed into a torrent of destruction, charging towards this newly born mountain boundary. Killing intent soared to the heavens, the dense negative energy even causing the very space to sizzle as it corroded. "You've come quite quickly," Lei Chen snorted coldly, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. Since the other side was so eager to deliver themselves to death, he would naturally oblige. With a thought, the supreme authority of the Plane Master manifested once more. At the core of the Stardew Great Forest, the towering golden ancient tree that propped up heaven and earth suddenly erupted with dazzling, resplendent golden radiance. In the next instant, the colossal tree body, along with the large swath of soil from the lake of life entwined by its roots, was uprooted by an irresistible spatial force. In a flash, it traversed tens of thousands of miles, appearing atop the newly born Plane mountain boundary, on the side closer to the Douluo Plane. Boom! The golden ancient tree's massive roots, like coiling dragons, thrust fiercely into the mountains. Majestic life energy instantly spread out, forming a gentle yet resilient golden light shield that enveloped a vast area on the Douluo side of the mountain range. Wherever the light shield reached, the land ravaged by the plane collision rapidly revived. Scorched earth sprouted tender shoots, while also bringing a heartening, reassuring power. Simultaneously, across the Douluo, spatial fluctuations flickered intensely. At the Sun-Moon Empire's border, the 10 top-tier Soul Engineer Corps armed to the teeth, along with 50 ordinary Soul Engineer Corps and the Spirit Masters in training, felt their vision blur. In an instant, they found themselves collectively positioned on the mountain defense line under the radiance of the golden ancient tree, their formations perfectly intact. Shrek Academy, the Body Sect, major clans and families, all titled Douluo whose spirit power had reached level 90 or above, regardless of their previous location, were now enveloped by a gentle yet irresistible force and teleported to the front line. The Stardew Great Forest, the Evil Demon Forest, the Extreme North Land, all spirit beasts with cultivation surpassing 100,000 years, were similarly relocated, standing alongside the human powerhouses on the defense line. In an instant, all the top-tier and core forces of the Douluo Plane had been assembled here by Lei Chen through his heaven and earth shifting methods. The sudden spatial transfer left the newly arrived individuals somewhat bewildered, but when they saw the tide-like abyss army surging from the opposite side of the distant mountains, radiating a heart-palpitating aura, they instantly understood their situation. An air of solemn killing intent immediately permeated the area. Just as everyone's nerves were taut, a calm, authoritative voice, seeming to resonate directly within the soul of each individual, clearly spread across the entire defense line. This battle concerns the survival of our plane, as well as your own paths of cultivation. It was the voice of the Plane Master. Everyone held their breath, focusing intently. I, who wield the origin power of this realm, possess the authority over life, death, and the cycle of reincarnation. In this battle, any warrior of our realm who fights valiantly against the enemy, even if slain in battle, as long as their corpse is not devoured by the abyss. I can, after the battle, draw upon the plane's life origin to help you reassemble your souls, reshape your flesh, and bring you back to life." As these words fell, an unbelievable light instantly erupted in the eyes of everyone on the defense line, be they human titled Douluo or 100,000-year spirit beasts, immediately transforming into ecstatic joy and unprecedented fighting spirit. They could be resurrected, then what was there to fear? Conversely, Lei Chen's voice turned icy. Abyss creatures are born from the world's negative energy and the law of devouring. Supported by their home plane, they can also revive and are extremely difficult to eradicate completely. However, simply bring their corpses beneath the golden ancient tree and purify them with the power of the life origin. This will sever their root of resurrection, causing them to be utterly annihilated. All who slay abyss creatures and bring their corpses to the golden ancient tree for purification shall, depending on the enemy's strength, receive the plane's fortune blessing and origin reward. This is the plane's commendation. Assisting you in breaking through bottlenecks and glimpsing the divine rank is not impossible. The golden ancient tree's light flared brilliantly at that moment, as if confirming the oath of the plane master. The majestic life aura and a profound, mysterious fluctuation made everyone's blood boil with excitement. Before them was the promise of resurrection, eliminating worries of the rear. Behind them was the plane's reward, spurring them forward. In an instant, all the Douluo powerhouses assembled here had not a trace of hesitation or fear left in their eyes. Only blazing fighting spirit and a thirst for merit remained. With the boundary as the frontier and gold as the oath, the battle for the plane's survival was now declared. There was only one path: fight to the death. Chapter 68, The Abyssal Saint Lord's Invitation, True Name Revealed. Lei Chen's declaration, imbued with the will of the plane, was like a reassurance dropped into their own ranks, and also like a raging inferno igniting their fighting spirit. The brilliant light shed by the golden ancient tree, and the promises of post-war resurrection, and rewards for killing enemies, transformed the panic and unease caused by the plane collision and the impending powerful enemy into a surging battle intent of shared hatred. Countless gazes eagerly fixed on the surging dark red tide from across the mountain range, waiting only for an order to strike back head-on. However, just as this battle intent reached its peak, a soft yet supremely majestic voice, like a cold viper, quietly penetrated the energy turbulence that had not yet fully subsided at the plane boundary, clearly resounding in the ears of every Douluo powerhouse. He, what excellent methods, what splendid spirit. To speak of resurrection before battle, to drive the masses with profit, truly saves a lot of trouble in boosting morale. The owner of this voice was naturally the Abyssal Saint Lord. His tone gave no hint of joy or anger, as if he were merely stating a fact. Soldiers against soldiers, kings against kings. As the plane master, surely you, like this unwelcome guest who has come from afar, should not be mingling among ordinary troops. The Abyssal Saint Lord's voice carried a hint of subtle sarcasm. The peak of the newly formed mountain from the collision of the two realms would be a good place to observe the battle. I wonder, dare you come for a discussion? This seemingly polite invitation was, in fact, an open scheme that could not be refused. If the plane master were to cower behind the army, it would undoubtedly severely dampen their morale, but if he accepted the invitation, it would mean that the highest combat powers of both sides would neutralize each other, unable to directly interfere with the battle below. The scales of victory would be entirely left to the core forces of both sides to decide. Upon hearing this, Lei Chen's expression remained unchanged, as if he had long anticipated this move from the opponent. He swept his gaze over the Douluo allied forces, who had already formed their ranks and were radiating a powerful aura, and his voice, calm yet resounding far and wide, declared, "Below I leave it to you. Remember, in this battle, there is only advance, no retreat, and merits will surely be rewarded. All enemies from outside can be killed." As his voice fell, Lei Chen's figure had already transformed into a faint seven-colored stream of light, appearing almost instantaneously on the peak of the new, towering mountain range that seemed to split the world in half. On the mountain peak, strong winds howled, stirring the chaotic energy currents from the two planes, emitting wails like ghosts and gods. On one side was the still-living scenery of the Douluo Plane, though the land was scarred, the golden ancient tree's radiance stubbornly shone. On the other side was the eternal desolation and dark red of the Abyss Plane, filled with the scent of sulfur and destruction. The Abyssal Saint Lord had already stood with his hands behind his back on the other side of the boundary line. he still maintained his sinisterly handsome appearance, his dark purple robes fluttering in the energy wind, dark gold flowing in his vertical pupils, looking at the quietly appearing Lei Chen with a playful gaze, as if scrutinizing prey. Unexpectedly, no earth-shattering divine conflict immediately erupted between the two. The atmosphere even seemed somewhat, strangely calm. Both Lei Chen and the Abyssal Saint Lord knew clearly at this moment that without absolute certainty of quickly defeating the opponent, rashly initiating a divine battle would be meaningless, serving only to exhaust divine power and result in mutual destruction. Therefore, their most important task at present was to keep a close watch on each other, ensuring that neither could interfere with the battlefield below. "This is truly surprising," the Abyssal Saint Lord broke the silence first, a characteristic false smile appearing on his face, his tone as relaxed as if chatting with a neighbor. "I didn't expect your excellency to be so hospitable, actually opening the door and letting us in. This grand gift has left me somewhat overwhelmed." Lei Chen's expression was indifferent, like ancient, unmelting profound ice, scoffing at the Saint Lord's pretense. "The feeling is mutual. Haven't you also gambled everything, directly crashing your entire plane here, leaving no retreat? It seems you are indeed full of confidence in devouring this realm." Hearing Lei Chen's pointed words, the smile on the Abyssal Saint Lord's face remained unchanged, but a trace of extremely subtle gloom flickered in the depths of his eyes. He did not respond directly but instead changed the subject, asking seemingly casually, "Speaking of which, we've been clashing until now, and I still haven't had the honor of asking your esteemed name. I can't keep referring to you as Plane Master, can I?" Lei Chen looked calmly at the Saint Lord and slowly uttered these words, "Tian Shen, you can call me Lei Chen." The moment Lei Chen's words left his mouth, the Abyssal Saint Lord's previously composed face, with its smile that suggested everything was under control, suddenly froze. His dark golden vertical pupils sharply contracted to pinpricks, staring intently at Lei Chen, as if wanting to see through him from inside out. The obscure yet powerful aura around him also momentarily became disordered due to this sudden shock, causing the surrounding spatial energy to ripple. How do you know?" Tian Shen's voice for the first time lost its feigned composure, taking on a hint of unbelievable sharpness and iciness. "The name, Tian Shen, has been abandoned since I took control of the Abyss, and no outsider in the universe should know it. Lei Chen, how exactly did you find out?" This name was one of the deepest secrets in his heart, related to the origin of his birth. He had never even mentioned it to the Abyssal kings he trusted most. Now being exposed by Lei Chen's single sentence brought a shock far exceeding any form of attack, making him instantly feel a sense of dread at being completely seen through, with nowhere to hide. Facing the Abyssal Saint Lord's erratic gaze, filled with suspicion and murderous intent, Lei Chen merely allowed the corner of his mouth to subtly curve upwards, forming a profound and mysterious arc, then returned to his previous indifference, not bothering to answer the Saint Lord's question. This posture further fueled the Saint Lord's anger, completely shattering his feigned ease and hypocrisy. His expression darkened and he sneered, "HMPH, playing tricks. No matter by what means you pried into my true name, it won't change the final outcome. Your plane is destined to become the nourishment for my abyss's growth, and you, Lei Chen, will become my stepping stone to a higher level." At this point, a flash of determination and ruthlessness flickered in the Saint Lord's eyes. As if to regain some ground and demonstrate their absolute strength, he immediately let out a deep shout. "Come out, let this Lei Chen also witness our sincerity." As the Abyssal Saint Lord's voice fell, two condensed streams of light, one scarlet like blood and one black like ink, suddenly shot out from the abyssal void behind him, like meteors tearing through the dark red sky, stopping steadily beside Tian Shen. When the streams of light dispersed, the two figures revealed within caused Lei Chen's usually calm gaze to suddenly sharpen. It was actually them. Chapter 69, Tang Hao and Yin, Coercion and Choice. At the peak of the mountain range, in the center where the two lords of the plane confronted each other, the air seemed to solidify into a tangible substance. The two figures that suddenly appeared beside the Abyssal Saint Lord exuded undisguised powerful auras. However, when Lei Chen's gaze penetrated the crimson and dark halos and clearly saw the faces of the newcomers, a clear hint of surprise finally flickered in his deep, placid eyes. "It's you," Lei Chen's voice was still calm, but the surprise was genuine. These two sudden arrivals were indeed old acquaintances to him. It was none other than Tang Hao and Yin, who, more than a year ago, when he completely controlled the Douluo Plane and purged Tang San's forces, managed to tear through space and escape with their lives thanks to the contingency plan left by the god king Tang San. Lei Chen had indeed not expected that after escaping from the Douluo Plane, this couple, drifting in the vast universe, would ultimately choose not to seek the god realm, but instead defect to the Abyss Plane, which was about to go to war with the Douluo Plane. At this moment, Tang Hao's figure was still burly, but his face was colder than ever, with an unresolvable malice and hatred condensed between his brows. Yin stood quietly beside him, her beautiful face etched with a lingering sorrow and struggle, her gaze towards Lei Chen extremely complex, containing hatred and even an indescribable plea. The moment Lei Chen recognized them, Tang Hao had already stepped forward, his eyes, filled with rage, locked onto Lei Chen. His voice, like clashing ice, carried an undeniable accusation as he sharply demanded. "Plain Master, I ask you, where is Wutong? What have you done to Wutong?" Facing Tang Hao's anxious and furious questioning, the surprise on Lei Chen's face quickly faded, returning to its previous indifference. He glanced at the abyssal Saint Lord, then at the extremely nervous Tang Hao and Yin, and spoke in an unperturbed tone. "Tang Wutong, she is currently under my control, and her life is not in danger." He paused slightly, his gaze sweeping over the eyes of Tang Hao and his wife, which momentarily lit up with a glimmer of hope, and continued, "However, she is merely safe. She has been sealed by me with the power of the plane's origin and imprisoned in a desperate place. But now, since you two have chosen to align with the Abyss Plane, standing against me and becoming my enemies, then your granddaughter's safety, I'm afraid I can no longer guarantee it." As soon as these words were uttered, they exploded in Tang Hao and Yin's hearts like a sudden clap of thunder. Lei Chen's words were a naked threat. The meaning couldn't be clearer. "If you dare to help the Abyss fight me, I dare to kill your granddaughter." Tang Hao's rage erupted, and boundless divine power uncontrollably overflowed from his body, causing the surrounding space to twist violently. The massive clear sky hammer hummed, clearly indicating his extreme fury. Yin's face turned even paler, and she instinctively clutched her husband's arm, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. Lei Chen took in their reactions, his eyes subtly shifting, then his tone seemed to soften slightly as he calmly said, "Of course, things are not without room for maneuver." He looked at Tang Hao and Yin and proposed a condition. "As long as you choose to stand by and not interfere in the conflict between me and the Abyssal Saint Lord during this plane war, then I can guarantee that after this war completely ends, I will return Tang Wutong to you, completely unharmed and whole." This promise, like a beam of light cast into endless darkness, instantly illuminated the hearts of Tang Hao and Yin, which had been almost filled with hatred and despair. The reason they had sought refuge with the Abyssal Saint Lord, besides having nowhere else to go, was primarily driven by the belief that their granddaughter had fallen victim to Lei Chen, and they only desired revenge. But now, upon learning that their granddaughter was still alive, and the hope of rescuing her was right before their eyes, as long as they chose neutrality. The huge turn of events caused even Tang Hao's resolute will to waver. Yin was even on the verge of blurting out her agreement. For her, nothing was more important than her granddaughter's safety. He heeds harder. Just as Tang Hao and Yin were in an internal struggle, almost swayed by Lei Chen's terms, the abyssal sage Lord Tianchen, who had been observing coldly from the side, suddenly let out a mocking sneer. "What a moving drama, Your Excellency Lei Chen." The false smile on the Saint Lord's face disappeared, replaced by undisguised coldness and ridicule. "You intend to make two people retreat from the battlefield with the life of a little girl. What a clever scheme." His gaze turned to Tang Hao and Yin, whose expressions kept changing, and his tone carried both temptation and doubt. "Brother Hao, do you really believe his promise is credible? He is now afraid of our combined strength, so he is naturally willing to agree to any terms. But once you withdraw, I will be left alone, and if he finds an opportunity to turn the tables, will he still keep his promise then?" The Saint Lord's voice suddenly rose, with a hint of sharpness. "At that time, he can easily go back on his word and deal with you two as well. Then, not only will you be unable to save your granddaughter, but you will also lose your own lives." Upon hearing this, Lei Chen didn't even bother to look at the abyssal Saint Lord, but simply said to Tang Hao and Yin, "If you don't believe my promise, I can sign a god's covenant with you. Swearing by the plane's origin and divine soul, once the covenant is established, even a god king cannot violate it. Is that enough?" "God's covenant?" These 4 words, like heavy hammers, struck Tang Hao and Yin's hearts once again. A covenant that even a god-king cannot violate. If it could truly be signed, then Lei Chen's promise would be virtually set in stone. At this, Tang Hao and Yin's wavering became even more pronounced. Their granddaughter's life and death hinged entirely on their choice at this moment. Agree, and there was great hope for her survival. Refuse, and it was almost equivalent to personally pushing their granddaughter to her doom. How could this not make them waver? Seeing that the 2 powerful helpers he had painstakingly recruited were being swayed by Lei Chen's few words, almost convinced, a cold killing intent and impatience finally flashed in the eyes of Abyssal Sage Lord Tianchen. Enough! He let out a cold shout, like shattering ice, interrupting Tang Hao and Yin's struggling thoughts. The Saint Lord's gaze, like 2 cold knives, swept over the couple, his voice carrying an undeniable resolve. Tang Hao, how long will you keep deceiving yourselves? Do you still naively believe that at this point, there is still room for compromise? His tone became extremely cruel. From the moment he expelled you, you and he have been in an irreconcilable situation. Even if you withdraw now, will he let you go afterwards? Don't forget how you escaped from his grasp. Wake up, the Saint Lord's voice was like a final judgment. Your only choice now is to join forces with me, and with all your might, utterly defeat and devour him and his plane here. As for your granddaughter. The Abyssal Saint Lord paused, and a nearly cruel indifference appeared on his face as he said, word by word. Just consider her dead, and what you must do now is to avenge her. Chapter 70, Decisiveness, a second-level god enters the fray. The Abyssal Saint Lord's words, bone-chilling and cutting through all illusions, were like countless poisoned icicles stabbing deep into the hearts of Tang Hao and Yin. Especially the final sentence, just treat her as if she were already dead, carried a cruel decisiveness that completely crushed the last sliver of hope and hesitation in their hearts. Tang Hao fell silent. On his angular face, the muscles twitched slightly. His clenched fists were so tight that his knuckles turned white, making a cracking sound. The violent divine power, leaking uncontrollably from his body, caused the space around him to warp in an unstable manner, manifesting the towering waves of turmoil within his heart. How could he not know that every word the Saint Lord spoke was a bloody reality? From the moment they were forced to abandon their granddaughter and flee the Douluo Plane alone, Tang Hao had already, in the depths of his heart, regarded Wutong as someone who was already dead. Because the enmity between them and Lei Chen, the Plane Master, was already as deep as the abyss, a fight to the death. Entrusted by their son Tang San, the couple had secluded themselves on the Douluo Plane. In reality, they coveted the plane's core and plotted to seize the body of the newborn Plane Master. Such actions were an irreconcilable blood feud in any world. Furthermore, Lei Chen had later used thunderous methods to exile the God Realm, casting their son, daughter-in-law, and even the entire God Realm into the unknown spacetime turbulence, their lives and deaths uncertain. With new and old grudges stacked together, it was destined that the conflict between them and Lei Chen could only end with the complete destruction of one side. Any compromise or retreat was merely self-deception, delaying the arrival of the final judgment. If they allowed themselves to be restrained by Lei Chen, now out of concern for their granddaughter's life and chose to stand by, once Lei Chen won this battle and freed his hands, how could he possibly let go of these 2 major threats? At that time, not only would they fail to save their granddaughter, but the couple would also inevitably be annihilated. There was simply no choice. Thinking of this, the last trace of struggle and hesitation in Tang Hao's eyes was replaced by a sense of resolve. He snapped his head up, his bloodshot eyes staring fixedly at the distant Lei Chen, as if he wanted to carve his image into the depths of his soul. How? Just then, a cool and trembling hand gently grasped his tensed fist. Tears still marked Yin's exquisite face, and her eyes were filled with endless pain and pleading. As a grandmother, being forced to personally give up the hope of her granddaughter's survival was more painful than being killed. How she wished her husband would hesitate a bit longer. Perhaps there was another way. Tang Hao felt the coldness and trembling from his wife's hand, and a pang of sharp pain shot through his heart as well. He turned his hand over and squeezed Yin's hand tightly, the force so great it almost caused her pain. But he did not look at her. His gaze remained locked onto Lei Chen. In a raspy, low, yet indisputably decisive tone, he said to Yin. Yin, say no more. We have no way back. If we cannot bury this Plane Master along with this world today, we will be the ones to die in the future. Wutong, she will understand our difficulties. He paused slightly, as if trying to convince himself or give his wife a hollow explanation. His voice carried a near-numb calmness. In the future, when Little San leads the God Realm back from the space-time turbulence and reorganizes, I will naturally explain everything today to him. As soon as these words were spoken, it meant Tang Hao had made his final decision, to abandon Tang Wutong and join forces with the Abyssal Saint Lord to thoroughly destroy Lei Chen and the Douluo Plane he controlled in this battle at all costs. Lei Chen, suspended at the other end of the mountain peak, took in the reaction of the Tang Hao couple. Regarding Tang Hao's final, correct choice, not even a hint of surprise appeared on his face, as if everything was already within his expectations. His previous words, which seemed to offer a way out, were less about truly wanting to win over Tang Hao and Yin to neutrality, and more an overt plot and a casual probe. If it succeeded, it would naturally save a lot of trouble. If not, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. However, the faint, flickering arc of mockery at the corner of his mouth never dissipated. On the other side, after hearing Tang Hao's resolute words, a very subtle hint of ridicule and coldness flickered deep within Abyssal Saint Lord Tianshan's dark gold vertical pupils. Explained to Tang San, wait for the God Realm to return, truly laughably naive, Tianshan sneered repeatedly in his heart. How could he not know that if Tang San really led the gods of the God Realm to escape the space-time turbulence and return, given the God Realm's attitude toward evil existences like the Abyss Plane, the first thing they would wipe out would be his Abyss Plane? How could he possibly allow that to happen? In this battle, he not only wanted to win, but he also wanted to win thoroughly. After devouring and digesting the Douluo Plane, the next ones to be dealt with would be this Tang Hao couple, who had lost their utility and also possessed a God Realm background. The divine power within them was also a rare and great supplement for the Abyss Plane. However, for now, these two were still important pawns for dealing with Lei Chen. This killing intent naturally had to be hidden deep within and could not be revealed in the slightest. Thus, a hypocritically warm smile instantly appeared on the Saint Lord's face as he clapped and laughed. Good, good, good. Brother Hao is able to see the big picture and make such a wise decision. It is truly our fortune. With this, if we join forces, why should we worry about the great task failing? His laughter ceased, and his gaze turned toward the battlefield at the plane's border below, where battle cries shook the sky and energy light constantly flashed. His tone turned grim. Since that's the case, let's delay no further. I will personally pin down this Lei Chen. You two, head down the mountain immediately and strike with all your might to slaughter every living being participating in the battle on the Douluo Plane, whether humans or spirit beasts. Then, send their corpses and soul energy into the Abyss Plane. Tianshan's eyes flickered with greed and urgency. For every bit of this world's vitality and energy devoured, my power will grow a bit stronger. As one waxes and the other wanes, Lei Chen will surely be defeated. Go now, use the blood and wails of the enemy to sacrifice for our upcoming victory. Following the Saint Lord's command, Tang Hao took one last deep look at Lei Chen, his eyes now filled with nothing but pure killing intent. He suddenly pulled the tearful but silent Yin beside him, and the two transformed into two streaks of brilliant light. Like two falling meteors carrying towering divine might, they charged fiercely toward the Douluo allied defense line. The Saint Lord also completely locked his gaze on Lei Chen. The dark purple divine power around him surged like a boiling ocean, and the phantom of the super divine artifact, the heavenly saint abyss-splitting halberd, loomed behind him. He grinned cruelly. Lei Chen, it's about to end. Atop the mountain peak, the ultimate confrontation between the two lords of the plains caused the atmosphere to tighten to its limit instantly. Meanwhile, the bloody slaughter below would also enter a fever pitch with the addition of two god-level experts. Chapter 71, Electrolux, 1 against 2. The Abyssal Saint Lord, Tianshan, looked as if victory was already in his grasp, his eagerness to act more than obvious. His calculated plan was to personally restrain Lei Chen, a plain master of the same rank, while relying on the unexpected surprises of Tang Hao and Yin, two second-level god combatants, to form an overwhelming force on the battlefield below. As long as Tang Hao and Yin successfully slaughtered the living beings of Douluo and fed back a massive amount of life energy and soul origin to the Abyss Plane, the Saint Lord's power would continue to grow, while Lei Chen would gradually weaken as his plane's origin was continuously devoured. When the balance was eventually broken, he could use that momentum to completely crush Lei Chen and complete the devouring of the entire Douluo Plane. This plan seemed simple and crude, yet due to the addition of the Tang Hao couple, It was almost impossible to counter. However, he had ultimately thought things through too simply. Since Lei Chen dared to open the barriers and choose a head-on confrontation, how could he not have a trump card to deal with the enemy's high-level combatants? Just as Tang Hao and Yin transformed into two divine lights filled with the aura of destruction, tearing through the sky like falling stars, and carrying a monstrous killing intent, as they were about to crash into the fiercely clashing front lines below to start a one-sided massacre. Buzz! A beam of milky white light, not dazzling but incredibly dense and seemingly capable of freezing the soul, rose into the sky without warning from behind the defensive line, shrouded by the golden ancient tree. The moment the light pillar appeared, a vast, holy, yet uniquely oppressive pressure, carrying a hint of extinction and death, swept across the entire border battlefield like a tide. This pressure was so strong that it was not at all inferior to the combined momentum of Tang Hao and Yin. In fact, due to its peculiar attributes, it added a layer of mystery and unpredictability. Within the milky white light pillar, a figure slowly solidified. He wore simple, ancient mage robes, his face aged yet full of wisdom, holding a strange staff that seemed constructed from countless white bones and soul crystals. It was the necromancer saint god, whose soul and physical body were now fully restored and who held the status of the undead space, Electrolux. Electrolux's appearance instantly drew the gaze of all the powerful experts. He stood suspended in the air, his staff lightly tapping the void as a gentle ring of milky white light rippled out, perfectly blocking the path of Tang Hao and Yin's dive like an insurmountable chasm. This path is closed. Electrolux's voice was calm, but carried an unquestionable authority that clearly reached the ears of Tang Hao, Yin, and even the two lords of the plane confronting each other on the mountain peak. Tang Hao's forward momentum came to a sudden halt, and a massive phantom of the clear sky hammer solidified behind him. His gaze was as sharp as a blade as he stared fixedly at Electrolux and barked, "Who are you? How dare you block my path?" Yin also frowned slightly. She could feel the energy level emanating from the old man before her was clearly at the god level, and his aura was as deep as the sea, causing her to feel a faint sense of trepidation. Electrolux did not directly answer Tang Hao's question. Instead, he looked at the two of them and said slowly, "In a struggle between planes, life and death are left to fate. But since you two are no longer of this world, why bother returning to wantonly create slaughter? It would be better to withdraw now. Perhaps you might preserve yourselves." "Withdraw?" Tang Hao laughed out of extreme anger. "Don't even think about it. Today I shall trample this world to vent the hatred in my heart. Those who block my path shall die." Before his voice had even faded, Tang Hao had already struck out violently. Knowing that time was precious and could not be delayed, the massive clear sky hammer brought with it the momentum to shatter mountains and split seas. Enveloped in surging golden divine power, it smashed down toward Electrolux like an ancient divine mountain. At the same time, Yin also raised her slender hand, and countless blue-silver emperor vines shimmering with blue-gold light appeared out of thin air, coiling toward Electrolux like spirit snakes, aiming to restrict his movements. Facing the combined assault of two second-level deities, Electrolux's expression remained unchanged as he merely uttered a few ancient and obscure syllables. In the next moment, the light at the tip of the staff in his hand flared brilliantly, and a miniature 9-layered pagoda emitting an aura of eternal immortality flew out, spinning and rapidly expanding in the wind. This pagoda was precisely the natal divine artifact Electrolux had painstakingly refined during this period, combining his profound understanding of the laws of the soul and extinction with top-tier materials provided by the Douluo Plane, the Tower of Eternity. With Electrolux's alchemy expertise, which at his peak could refine a great divine artifact, nearing the level of a super-divine artifact, it would not have been impossible to refine a true great divine artifact, given sufficient time and resources. However, with the plane war imminent and time pressing, he had put forth all his effort, and could only first refine this prototype of the Tower of Eternity at the divine artifact level. Even so, its power far exceeded that of ordinary divine artifacts. Eternal soul suppression. Electrolux gave a low shout, and the Tower of Eternity instantly became 100 meters tall. Countless profound runes flowed over the body of the tower, emitting a great power that suppressed souls and froze time and space. The earth-shattering strike of the clear sky hammer smashed against the tower, producing a dull thud. Terrifying ripples of energy spread out, shaking the surrounding space into distorted collapse, but the Tower of Eternity remained motionless, not even swaying in the slightest. As for the blue-silver emperor vines that came coiling in, the moment they neared the milky white halo emitted by the tower, they retreated and disintegrated one after another like melting snow. What? Tang Hao's pupils shrank. His full-strength strike had actually been blocked so easily by the opponent. Yin's beautiful face also changed slightly, and she lost her voice saying, "His divine artifact is so strange, it can completely counter my life binding." With his own strength alone, Electrolux easily neutralized the joint attack of the two second-level gods, his figure as steady as a rock. He was in no hurry to counterattack. Instead, he controlled the Tower of Eternity to hover above him, shedding paths of milky white divine light that guarded him airtight, clearly having decided to stop Tang Hao and Yin right here. The battle that followed left all the observers dumbfounded. Tang Hao roared repeatedly, pushing the clear sky hammer techniques to their limit, the 9981 styles continuous and unending, as if every strike was enough to shatter stars. Yin also provided full support, her blue-silver domain fully open, attempting to erode Electrolux's divine power with the force of life. However, relying on the absolute defense of the Tower of Eternity and his consummate mastery of the laws of the soul and extinction, Electrolux was always able to resolve the crises in the blink of an eye. Occasionally counterattacking once, he forced the Tang Hao couple to retreat and defend, appearing to handle the situation with ease. On the field, it was actually Electrolux alone fighting Tang Hao and Yin to a draw. Neither side could do anything to the other. This bizarre scene caused the abyssal Saint Lord Tianshan's face on the mountain peak to instantly turn as dark as water, looking extremely unsightly. How is this possible? Where did this old fellow pop out from? Tianshan was both shocked and furious. Despite all his calculations, he hadn't expected Lei Chen to have such a powerful god-level existence hidden under him, whose strength could actually withstand the joint efforts of Tang Hao and Yin. His original perfect plan had completely fallen through at this moment. Counting on the Tang Hao couple to quickly break the deadlock was no longer possible. The battle below was bound to fall into a cruel war of attrition, and a war of attrition was precisely where the Douluo side, with the life support of the golden ancient tree and the Plane Master's promise of resurrection, held the advantage. A situation that was originally a sure thing had taken a sharp turn for the worse because of the sudden appearance of Electrolux. How could he possibly keep his composure? Compared to the Saint Lord's mixture of shock and fury, Lei Chen's expression appeared somewhat strange. He first glanced at Electrolux, who was fighting on equal terms with the Tang Hao couple below, a flash of approval crossing his eyes, before turning his gaze back to the ashen-faced abyssal Saint Lord, his thoughts spinning rapidly. This Saint Lord, could it be that his trump cards really are just Tang Hao and Yin? Lei Chen pondered inwardly, his brow furrowing imperceptibly. He had previously assumed that since the Saint Lord was so certain, he must have obtained support from the Crimson Domain, and even the Crimson Mother might be lurking nearby. If it were truly a joint invasion of the Abyss and the Crimson Domain, even with Electrolux, he would surely fall into a bitter struggle, and might truly have to awaken the Silver Dragon King early to cope. But looking at it now, Lei Chen carefully observed the Saint Lord's unconcealed shock and annoyance, as well as the lack of any sign of a third powerful, hidden force supporting his aura. It seems I was overthinking it. He didn't collude with the Crimson Domain, or rather, the Crimson Domain didn't respond to his summons. This discovery allowed the string that had been tightly wound in Lei Chen's heart to loosen slightly. If the enemy was merely an abyss plane plus two second-level gods who had lost their god positions. Lei Chen's eyes narrowed slightly, and a hint of cold killing intent had already entered his gaze as he looked at the abyssal Saint Lord again. If there are no other variables, Lei Chen calculated silently in his heart, 3 years. No, perhaps it won't take that long at all. 2 years at most, and I can make your abyss plane history, completely devouring its origin to strengthen my Douluo, as for now. A faint, indifferent curve hooked at the corner of Lei Chen's mouth as he stood with his hands behind his back at leisure, casting his gaze toward the Douluo allied forces below, who were regaining their footing and even starting to turn the tide thanks to their spirit tool advantage and the promise of resurrection, now that Electrolux had blocked Tang Hao and Yin. Let's just watch the tug-of-war below first. Regardless, Lei Chen's gaze seemed to pierce through time, seeing the near future. The death of your abyss plane has already entered its final countdown. Chapter 72, Demigods in Fierce Battle. Atop the mountain range, the lords of the plane from both sides stood in confrontation. While Electrolux single-handedly held off Tang Hao and Yin, the war below the demigod level had already erupted in full force along the thousands of miles-long border of the nascent plane, rapidly escalating into a white-hot stage. A torrent of creatures from the abyss plane, like an endless tide of dark crimson, crashed wave after wave against the defensive lines constructed by the Douluo allied forces along the nascent mountain range. These creatures, varied in form and radiating an aura of savagery and destruction, knew no fear and feared no death. Their sole instinct was to devour everything before them that contained life force. On the side of the Douluo allied forces, after the initial shock, they had steadied their footing, bolstered by the life-giving radiance shed by the golden ancient tree and the promise of post-battle resurrection from their plane master. The long-range firepower foundation, formed by the Sun-Moon Empire's Soul Engineer Corps, continuously baptized the charging abyss creatures with artillery fire. Meanwhile, human-titled Douluos and 100,000-year spirit beasts acted as the spearhead forces, holding the front lines and engaging in desperate battles against powerful high-tier abyss creatures. However, what truly determined the ultimate outcome of this war of attrition were the duels between the top-tier demigod-level combatants of both sides. At this moment, in several of the most fiercely contested core areas of the battlefront, several earth-shattering struggles between evenly matched opponents were unfolding. On the left flank of the battlefront, an area was already covered by the Snow Empress's ultimate ice domain, the temperature plummeting drastically. Her opponent was the Spirit Emperor, who ruled the second layer of the abyss. The Spirit Emperor was clad in magnificent golden robes, handsome in appearance, his enormous golden cape flapping loudly in the wind. Were it not for the profound spiritual light in his eyes that seemed to pierce through souls, he would be almost indistinguishable from a powerful human. His formidable spiritual power was his most terrifying weapon, formless and intangible, yet capable of striking directly at the soul and distorting perception. The Snow Empress's face was like frozen frost. The divine weapon in her hand, forged from Ice Extreme Divine Crystal, the Ice Extreme Divine Sword, swirled with azure light. Facing the Spirit Emperor's unpredictable spiritual assaults, she elevated the ice and snow will tempered by her 900,000-year cultivation to its peak. With each swing of the Ice Extreme Divine Sword, arcs of sword energy imbued with ultimate frost were unleashed, capable of freezing not only physical matter, but also spiritual fluctuations. Lei Chen. A spiritual assault was frozen and shattered by a sword arc. A flicker of surprise passed through the Spirit Emperor's eyes. His figure became elusive, his golden cape billowing as an even more powerful storm of spiritual power swept forth. The Snow Empress merged with her sword, navigating through the spiritual storm, opposing the eerie change with the ultimate stillness. One possessed vast spiritual power, the other had a will as unyielding as ice. They clashed fiercely on both spiritual and energy levels, locked in a stalemate where neither could gain the upper hand. The central part of the battlefront witnessed the most violent combat. The fierce Emperor, ruler of the Abyss's third layer, wore heavy blue-purple armor. Darkness swirled beneath his helmet, with only a pair of purple eyes gleaming. Each swing of the massive war halberd in his hand stirred up a raging tide of dark crimson energy. This was not ordinary energy, but a more condensed, more destructive divine power, imbuing every attack with the force to shatter mountains and rivers. Opposite him, Dai Tian revealed his true form as a black dragon, his roar shaking the heavens. Facing the fierce Emperor's divine, power-infused halberd strikes that tore through the sky, Dai Tian did not hesitate to employ his ultimate trump card, the Dragon God's Claw. The Dragon God's Claw reached out, unleashing a primal draconic majesty that forcefully met the edge of the war halberd surging with divine power. Boom! The clash of claw and halberd erupted in a deafening roar. The fierce Emperor's body swayed slightly, but he was not forced back. With a flick of his halberd, surging abyssal divine power erupted like a volcano, actually managing to rival the power of the Dragon God's Claw. Dai Tian's draconic eyes contracted, sensing the formidable nature of his opponent's power. The fierce Emperor danced wildly with his halberd, his divine power-fueled attacks coming in relentless waves. Dai Tian, relying on the supreme quality of the Dragon God's Claw and his own profound foundation, held firm and fought steadily. Every collision between them caused spatial tremors. The contest between pure physical might and divine-level energy made the outcome unpredictable in the short term. The right flank of the battlefront was a scene of brutal collision of pure physical strength. The demon emperor stood 3 meters tall with a massive head, burning skeletal eye sockets, and huge wings flapping behind it. Its giant claws shimmered with an eerie light. What it relied on most was its divine body, tempered and refined 1,000 times over in the abyss, nearly indestructible and capable of withstanding the vast majority of attacks. Facing an existence with a divine body, Douluo stepped forward with a wild laugh. He had just forged his own divine body, its bronze-like luster flowing with the boundless strength and resilience tempered by the body's secret techniques. "Come on, let's clash." He didn't dodge or evade, instead using his chest to directly receive the demon emperor's giant claw. Thud! It sounded like the striking of a 10,000-pound bell. Douluo's body swayed, the ground beneath his feet exploding, but only a faint white mark was left on his chest. The demon emperor's giant claw was knocked away. The flames in its skeletal eye sockets flickered, revealing shock. The strength of Douluo's divine body was actually not the slightest bit inferior to its own abyssal demonic physique. Exhilarating. Douluo countered with a backhanded punch, its force enough to collapse mountains. The demon emperor roared, swinging its claws to meet the attack while its huge wings beat, stirring up a corrosive black storm. The two powerhouses possessing divine bodies, like humanoid beasts of prey, engaged in the most primitive, most violent hand-to-hand combat. Fists and claws met, constant roaring sound erupting. Each collision stirred up terrifying shockwaves of air. Douluo's strength was fierce and unyielding. The demon emperor was eerie and vicious. The two fought inextricably, neither gaining even the slightest advantage. Above the battlefield, the Scythe Emperor's 5-meter-tall humanoid figure appeared exceptionally agile. The pair of enormous scythes formed from its arms shimmered with ghost light, their unparalleled sharpness having already reached the level of divine weapons. Kong Deming hovered in the air, the silver moon divine light shield above his head casting down soft moonlight. The Scythe Emperor's figure flashed, transforming into a black lightning bolt, its divine weapon-level scythe arms, carrying a shriek as if to tear space itself, struck the light shield. Clang! A sharp, ear-piercing sound of impact rang out. Although ripples spread across the silver moon divine light shield, it held firm. However, at the point of the scythe's impact, the shield's light noticeably dimmed. The ultimate sharpness of the divine scythe posed a tangible threat to the shield's defense. Kong Deming's expression turned grave. His hands formed seals, and the silver moon divine light shield shone brightly, shooting out dense moonbeam arrows in retaliation. Facing Kong Deming's counterattack, the Scythe Emperor relied on its super high-speed maneuver to change direction rapidly in midair. Its twin scythes whirled into a curtain of light, blocking or deflecting most of the moonbeam arrows. The occasional fish that slipped through the net that struck its body were mostly weakened by its hard carapace. One possessed Musu defense, but needed to be constantly vigilant against the divine scythe's armor-piercing strike. The other had sharp attack and unparalleled speed, but found it difficult to breach the divine light shield's absolute defense. The two were locked in an ultimate showdown of speed versus defense, attack versus evasion, where the slightest mistake from either side could instantly alter the course of the battle. Without exception, the several demigod battlefields had fallen into stalemate. The rulers of the abyss's upper layers, with their special advantages in spiritual power, divine bodies, and divine weapons, matched the top powerhouses of the Douluo Plane blow for blow across various aspects. Energy was crazy war of attrition, laws intense collision, yet none could truly suppress the other. The Legion battles below therefore became even more tragic. Both sides hoped their own top combat power would be the first to open up the situation. Blood soaked the earth, roars and wailing. This war concerning the fate of two planes still hung upon a delicate balance, awaiting the arrival of that opportunity that would break the equilibrium. Chapter 73, the balance about to be broken, it should end now. At the peak of the high mountain, the cold wind howled, swirling the chaotic energy flows from two planes and letting out a whimpering hiss. Lei Chen and the Abyssal Saint Lord, the two beings who held the supreme authority of their respective planes, remained suspended on either side of the mountain peak like two eternal sculptures. Their true bodies did not move an inch, but their invisible presence had long since locked onto each other. Any tiny flaw could trigger a cataclysmic, fatal strike. While confronting each other, their gazes simultaneously turned toward the battlefield at the plane's border below, which stretched for 10,000 miles and echoed with the sounds of slaughter. In the Saint Lord's dark gold vertical pupils, the shock, fury, and gloom previously caused by Electrolux's sudden appearance to intercept Tang Hao and his wife had gradually calmed. It was replaced by a rekindled confidence filled with cold calculation. He admitted that the old man under Lei Chen, who wielded the strange power of silence, was indeed a massive variable that had completely disrupted his plan to use Tang Hao and Yin to quickly open up the situation. But so what? A planar war was never a game that could be entirely decided by one or two top-tier experts, especially when the highest combat powers of both sides were keeping each other in check. The final victory was often determined by the comparison of the core forces, and that seemingly insignificant but continuous war of attrition, like a colony of ants gnawing at a dam. The Saint Lord's perception swept over the several demigod-level battle groups below like invisible tentacles. In the duel between the Snow Empress and the Spirit Emperor, the will of ice and snow and the vast divine sense annihilated each other, making it difficult to determine a winner. In the brutal clash between Dai Tian and the Fierce Emperor, every collision between the Dragon God's Claw and the Abyssal Divine Power caused space to tremble, showing they were evenly matched. The physical combat between the Dubuisi and the Demon Emperor was even more visceral, trading injury for injury in a wild and tragic struggle where neither could overcome the other. It would be hard to determine a winner in these three battlefields in a short time, but the fourth battlefield, where Kong Deming and the Scythe Emperor were fighting, would likely break the deadlock soon. Just as this thought arose in the Saint Lord's mind, sure enough, a sudden change occurred on the demigod battlefield below. The source of the change was precisely the clash between Kong Deming and the Scythe Emperor. The screech! A dark blade light tore through the sky at a speed exceeding the limit of the naked eye, slashing fiercely against the moonlight curtain cast by the silver moon divine light shield. Kong Deming let out a muffled groan as his figure retreated dozens of yards through the air. The silver moon divine light shield above his head vibrated violently, its light visibly dimming. His face turned slightly pale, and his breathing became a bit more rapid than before. In contrast, the Scythe Emperor's 5-meter-tall, agile body left trails of afterimages in the air. The divine weapon scythes formed by its arms flickered with dark light, emitting an increasingly sharp killing intent. It let out a cackling, strange laugh, and the flames in its skeletal eye sockets flickered even more intensely. Human, how much longer can your turtle shell hold up? The Scythe Emperor's voice was sharp and piercing, filled with the playfulness of a cat catching a mouse. Kong Deming's expression was grave. He didn't answer, instead pushing his spirit power to its limit to stabilize the silver moon divine light shield. He sighed inwardly. In the end, his cultivation level was holding him back. He had received the blessing of the Plane Master and obtained the alchemy inheritance of the Divine Seal Plane, allowing him to push his spirit to the divine weapon rank in advance. This had paved the way for him to reach the god level, which was undoubtedly a massive opportunity. However, the time had been too short. From the successful refinement until now, it had only been a few months at most. His original spirit power level was only level 95. Even though he had cultivated bitterly day and night during this period, and used the divine weapon's feedback to increase his spirit power far faster than before, he had only reached the level 97 Super Douluo realm. The spirit power of a Super Douluo could support the divine weapon level Silver Moon divine light shield for a short time. But against an abyssal king like the Scythe Emperor, who also possessed a divine weapon and had a far superior cultivation foundation, the disadvantage of massive spirit power consumption began to show in a prolonged battle. The Scythe Emperor had clearly sensed this as well. Its attacks became increasingly crafty and ruthless. It no longer sought a one-hit kill, but instead used its terrifying speed to constantly harass and wear him down. As its twin scythes swung, dark light crisscrossed, forcing Kong Deming to maintain a high-intensity defense continuously. His spirit power poured out like a floodgate opening. As one side waxed and the other waned, Kong Deming's situation began to become precarious. Defeat seemed to be only a matter of time. At the peak of the mountain, the abyssal Saint Lord, who had been closely monitoring the battle, finally showed the most obvious smile since the start of the war. It was a look of composure and triumph, as if the overall situation was already decided. He turned his head to look at Lei Chen, who still had a calm expression, and spoke with undisguised mockery. Lei Chen, it seems the goddess of luck is on my side after all. Even if that old fellow you found from somewhere managed to intercept Tang Hao and his wife, so what? In the end, it cannot change the destined outcome. His voice carried the certainty of victory. This subordinate of yours is about to break. Once the Scythe Emperor finishes him off and is free, he can immediately support the Spirit Emperor. 2 against 1, that woman playing with ice is doomed to lose. Next will be the Fierce Emperor, the Demon Emperor. These demigods of your plane will be defeated one by one and wiped out. The Saint Lord's voice grew colder, and once the demigod battlefield collapses, no matter how many ants make up the legions below, they are nothing but clay chickens and pottery dogs before a demigod, easily destroyed with a wave of a hand. At that time, my abyss plane will devour the vast majority of the living beings and energy of your Douluo plane. This will be a heavy blow to your plane, and its origin will surely be damaged. But for my abyss, it will be an unprecedented supplement. The Saint Lord grew more excited as he spoke, as if he could already see the dawn of victory. With this gain and loss, Lei Chen, do you think you can still be my opponent? The winner of this planar war will be me. And you, along with the world you protect, will become the stepping stones for me to reach a higher level. Ha 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 ha. Faced with the abyssal Saint Lord's near proclamation of victory and his mockery, Lei Chen's face still showed no sign of panic or anger. Not even a single ripple appeared. He simply turned his head slowly and used those eyes, deep as the starry sky, to calmly watch the self-satisfied abyssal Saint Lord. Instead, a meaningful, slightly mocking smile curled at the corners of his mouth. Is that so? Lei Chen's voice was as flat as water, yet it seemed to contain a strange power that made the Saint Lord's laughter stop involuntarily. You actually think you've won? Lei Chen shook his head gently, his tone carrying a kind of pity as if looking at an ignorant child, truly too naive. He paused, his gaze seemingly penetrating the Saint Lord's body, to see the irritability and unease deep within his heart caused by his repeated failures, and continued indifferently. Since the start of the war, I have been observing and waiting, to see if you still had any unexpected hidden cards. But unfortunately, until now, besides relying on those 2 stray dogs, Tang Hao and his wife who accidentally joined you, and hopping for these incompetent abyssal kings below, you have made no other moves. Lei Chen's tone suddenly turned cold, and a sharp light, almost tangible, erupted from his calm eyes. It seems you truly have no other trump cards. In that case, I won't waste any more time playing around with you. His gaze was like lightning, staring directly at the abyssal Saint Lord whose expression had suddenly changed. His voice was like thunder from the 9 heavens, exploding deep within the other's mind. Let it end. Forget to like, comment, subscribers, and share to AI Otaku Studio. Chapter 74, Outbreak, the bombardment of linked soul tools and level 9 fixed soul bombshells. Lei Chen's words, let it end, were like a pebble thrown into a calm lake. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried a strange rhythm that seemed to command the laws of the world and judge the finality of the situation, echoing clearly in the hearts of every powerhouse. Atop the high mountain, the abyssal Saint Lord, who had been full of pride and satisfaction, was momentarily stunned upon hearing this. The smile of impending victory on his face instantly froze, replaced by a hint of inexplicable shock and suspicion. He instinctively sensed that something was wrong. Lei Chen's tone was too calm, too certain, as if he were stating a preordained fact rather than making a bluff in a desperate situation. Death is at your doorstep, yet you still dare to speak such nonsense. Abyssal Saint Lord Tianchen subconsciously shouted sternly, trying to use words to suppress the unease suddenly rising in his heart. However, before his voice could fade, a sudden change occurred. Below, the towering golden ancient tree, which stood like a symbol of life and hope for the Douluo Plane, suddenly erupted with an unprecedentedly brilliant radiance. It wasn't just gold, it was a magnificent halo of 7 colors, red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, and purple circling the tree trunk like a rainbow after the rain. A vast, sea-like and pure force of the plane's source, as if summoned by a supreme will, began to boil with unprecedented vitality. This 7-colored light was not an attack, but a signal to ignite the beacon of the final counterattack. The moment the 7-colored light shone, the momentum of the Douluo allied forces, who had previously seemed to barely maintain their defensive line through the firepower advantage of spirit tools and the bloody battles of their powerhouses under the frantic assault of the abyss creatures, suddenly shifted. It was a resolute transformation from passive defense to active offense. Across the long defensive line, 10 top-tier Soul Engineer Corps and 50 ordinary Soul Engineer Corps, a total of 60 spirit tool arrays, saw every Soul Engineer soldier within them, regardless of cultivation level, simultaneously light up with spirit power radiance that resonated with their core-linked soul tool. Tens of thousands of spirit power streams, like 100 rivers returning to the sea, instantly converged into the core linked soul tool at the center of each soul engineer core through prearranged spirit tool circuits. Wang! The air let out an overburdened wail. At the positions of the 60 soul engineer core, space distorted violently, as if unable to withstand the sudden concentration of terrifying energy. In the next moment, 60 incredibly thick, high-energy spirit power rays of various colors, yet all containing the aura of destruction, erupted from various points along the defensive line like the roar of an awakening giant beast. They tore through the sky and shot fiercely toward the abyssal army surging forward like a tide. These 60 rays were clearly distinguished. 50 of them had relatively restrained light, but their energy density was enough to make any titled Douluo pale. Each one contained a terrifying power, capable of instantly killing an ordinary titled Douluo. The other 10 were even more dazzling, like the gaze of a death god. Wherever the light pillars passed, space was scorched with distorted marks. Their power was so great that it actually reached a horrifying level capable of threatening or even instantly killing a super Douluo. This was the highest crystallization of the Sun-Moon Empire's spirit tool technology over thousands of years, and the ultimate art of war displayed by Kong Deming after integrating the resources of the entire continent, the linked soul tool attack array. It took the power of hundreds or thousands of spirit masters and perfectly integrated, amplified, and transformed it through exquisite linked soul tools, turning individual parts into a whole and erupting with a destructive force far exceeding the sum of its parts. Since the start of the war, the Douluo allied forces had been holding back, even enduring heavy blows, just to keep this trump card hidden until the most critical moment to deliver the most lethal strike to the abyss. The abyssal army clearly hadn't expected the opponent to have such terrifying area of effect killing methods. The cannon fodder in the front row, mainly composed of low-rank abyss creatures, didn't even have time to scream before they were instantly vaporized and annihilated like snow under the sun under the sweep of the 60 destructive rays. The rays continued unabated, like 60 red-hot branding irons cutting into the dark red tide. Wherever they passed, they left 60 shocking vacuum zones that were cleared in an instant. However, this was only the beginning. Just as the light from the 60 linked soul tool rays had yet to completely dissipate, an even more heart-palpitating energy fluctuation erupted from the core of every soul engineer core. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The piercing sound of breaking air joined together, like the scythe of a death god slicing through the sky. 60 cylinders of various designs, yet all engraved with complex spirit tool runes and emitting an aura that made the soul tremble, were pushed out by specialized launch spirit tools. Trailing long tails of flame like 60 soul-chasing meteors, they drew graceful parabolas and smashed accurately into the rear of the abyssal army, the area where the abyssal kings with the strongest auras were located. Level 9 fixed soul bomb shells. The strategic reserves accumulated by the Sun-Moon Empire for thousands of years were, at this moment, poured out all at once without reservation. Every level 9 fixed soul bombshell was equivalent to the full strength strike of a level 99 limit Douluo. These were strategic weapons capable of changing the course of a regional battle. At this moment, the volley of 60 shells had a power that was no longer a simple addition. It triggered an energy storm that swept across the entire frontline battlefield. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The earth-shaking explosions were continuous, as if the entire boundary of the plane was being torn apart at this moment. First to erupt were extreme light and heat. Blinding white light instantly swallowed everyone's vision, as if dozens of suns had risen simultaneously within the abyssal camp. Next came the destructive shockwaves, like a physical tsunami, spreading frantically outward in a ring from the points of explosion. The ground shattered inch by inch like a fragile eggshell, with waves of earth kicked up hundreds of meters high. Dark red abyssal matter and the soil and rocks of the Douluo Plane were crudely mashed together, then instantly annihilated by even stronger energy. Space was like a broken mirror, covered in spiderweb-like black cracks that could not heal for a long time. Shrill wails were drowned out by even louder roars. Countless abyss creatures, whether they were cannon fodder who didn't fear death or backbone forces with strength comparable to a spirit Douluo or even an ordinary titled Douluo, were instantly reduced to ashes in this world-destroying chain of explosions, like candles in a gale. Those stronger ones, the abyssal kings of the first 36 layers who were equivalent to human titled Douluo, and the abyssal kings of the middle 36 layers who rivaled super Douluo, might have been able to barely withstand the aftershocks of a single linked soul tool ray. But in the core explosion area, equivalent to 60 limit Douluo striking at full strength simultaneously, their resistance appeared utterly pathetic. The protective abyssal energy was torn apart like wet paper, and their hard shells and bodies were easily ripped, melted, and evaporated before such absolute power. The abyssal kings of the first 36 and middle 36 layers were almost completely wiped out in this round of unannounced saturated strikes. Even the strongest abyssal kings of the final 36 layers, whose strength was comparable to human limit Douluo, were either at the edge of the explosion or were lucky enough not to be locked onto by multiple shells simultaneously, yet they still suffered devastating injuries. More than half of the kings from the final 36 layers, either because they were too close to the center of an explosion or because they were caught in the overlapping power of several shells, didn't even have a chance to struggle before they, along with their surrounding personal guards, turned into basic energy particles and dissipated into the world. The remaining half were all injured, their auras withered, and their eyes filled with unbelievable terror and shock. The powerful strength they took pride in appeared so laughable under this kind of covering, absolute power suppression. With just one volley, one unreserved outpouring, a huge swath of the frontline positions of the originally seemingly endless dark red tide of the abyssal army was forcibly erased. Smoke filled the air, energy turbulence raged, and the battlefield that was originally filled with battle cries fell into a brief, death-like silence. The soldiers of the Douluo allied forces, although they had received orders long ago, still felt a heart-palpitating shock witnessing this scene of destruction they had created with their own hands. On the side of the abyss, the surviving creatures fell into a state of massive panic and chaos. Atop the high mountain, the expression on Abyssal Saint Lord Tianqian's face had changed from shock and suspicion to complete ashen-faced distortion. Looking at the battle line below that had been emptied in an instant and the heavily damaged Abyssal Kings, an uncontrollable rage and chill rose frantically from the depths of his heart. He stared fixedly at Lei Chen, who still looked calm, and almost squeezed the words out from between his teeth. "You've planned this long ago." Chapter 75, The Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Corps enters the demigod battlefield. Watching a huge swath of the front line below instantly empty, as countless abyss creatures along with a large number of abyssal kings were reduced to ashes under the saturated strike of linked soul tool rays and Class 9 fixed-pack soul tool shells, the abyssal Saint Lord's expression turned ugly to the extreme. It was a look of alarm, fury, and lividness, the expression of one whose plans had been completely disrupted and whose advantage had vanished in an instant. Lei Chen took in the Saint Lord's colorful change of expression, a faint, somewhat teasing smile curling at the corner of his mouth as he spoke as if making small talk. "How does the Saint Lord find that display just now? This thing is called a linked soul tool, the crystallization of several millennia of soul tool wisdom from my plane. Its beauty lies in its ability to gather the power of thousands of low to mid-tier spirit masters into one place, where quantitative change triggers qualitative change, erupting with a power sufficient to threaten or even erase high-tier existences. Looking at the effect, it seems to barely meet the Saint Lord's standards." His tone was calm, as if he were introducing an ordinary object, but the meaning behind his words was like a sharp knife, ruthlessly stabbing through the Saint Lord's tense nerves. The appearance of this linked soul tool could be said to have completely changed the underlying logic of war. In past concepts, low-tier existences in such ultra-large-scale wars were almost useless, except to serve as cannon fodder to deplete the enemy's strength. But the linked soul tool broke this common knowledge. It twisted the power of countless ants into a single rope, turning fragments into a whole, and could actually erupt with a terrifying power sufficient to clear the field, heavily injure, or even kill high-tier powerhouses. This was undoubtedly a fatal blow to the Abyss Plane's tactic of relying on numerical superiority. Hearing this, the Abyssal Saint Lord let out a cold snort from his nostrils that suppressed a heaven-shaking rage, not even bothering to answer Lei Chen's obviously mocking question. His mind was racing. The battlefield below had suffered heavy losses, especially with the instant fall of a large number of Abyssal Kings. The pure abyss energy dissipating after their deaths was permeating the air above the battlefield. This was vital nourishment for the Abyss Plane. If he could recover this energy in time, he could completely resurrect the abyss creatures that had just died. Thinking of this, a ghostly light flashed in the Saint Lord's dark gold vertical pupils, and his fingers hidden within his magnificent sleeves moved imperceptibly. An invisible suction was about to cross space and envelop the majestic dissipating energy on the battlefield below. However, at the very moment, his intent moved. Why must the Saint Lord be in such a hurry? Lei Chen's slightly smiling voice rang out again, and at the same time, he seemingly casually flicked his sleeve. A gentle yet irresistible plane-level power, like a breeze brushing over a lake, silently rippled out, precisely cutting off the thread of energy traction the Saint Lord had just sent out. The Saint Lord felt that invisible suction hit an invisible and intangible, yet incredibly tough wall, instantly dissipating into nothingness. The Saint Lord snapped his head up, the killing intent in his eyes almost condensing into substance as he stared fixedly at Lei Chen. Lei Chen didn't care at all, his smile remaining indifferent, his tone even carrying a bit of consolation as he said, "They are but some low-level ants and incompetent kings. If they're dead, they're dead. Why be in such a hurry to recover these scraps?" The Saint Lord should broaden his perspective. The real highlight, the outcome at the demigod level, has yet to be decided. When those demigods under your command also start falling, it won't be too late to worry about recovering energy. The contempt and certainty in these words made the rage in the Saint Lord's chest almost explode. Just as he was about to retort, another change occurred on the demigod battlefield below. Just as the Douluo allied forces launched a full-line Soul Tool counterattack, throwing the Abyss army into chaos, a brilliant stream of light rose from the rear of the Douluo allied forces. Like a sharp sword, it pierced straight into the clouds, and then sped towards the most intense part of the demigod battlefield, the airspace where Kong Deming and the Scythe Emperor were fighting. That stream of light was not a single person, but a well-trained, well-equipped army, the Sun Moon Empire's hidden ace and strongest force, the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Corps. They all took to the sky now, Soul Tool thrusters at full power, their goal clear. They were actually going to intervene in a demigod-level battle. The Scythe Emperor, who was locked in combat with Kong Deming, immediately sensed the approach of this army of ants. The soul fire within its skeletal eye sockets jumped, flashing with a hint of extreme disdain and cruelty. "Bugs who don't know the meaning of death, you dare to interfere in the domain of gods," the Scythe Emperor sneered inwardly. It was already known for its speed. Seeing Kong Deming showing signs of fatigue due to his massive consumption of spirit power, it immediately seized an opportunity. Its body flickered like a ghost, leaving a string of afterimages as it skillfully bypassed the moonluminescence barrier Kong Deming had exerted himself to swing out. As its twin scythes crossed, carrying a whistle that tore through space, it lunged straight at the high-speed charging Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Corps. Its speed and momentum far exceeded the imagination of an ordinary titled Douluo. In the Scythe Emperor's view, with this one strike, this seemingly elite human legion would instantly suffer heavy casualties, or even be wiped out. This would perfectly strike at the enemy's morale and distract that troublesome Kong Deming. The giant scythe blades, flashing with dark divine light, were like invitations from the god of death, about to slash into the Soul Engineer Corps formation. However, at this critical moment, buzz! A strange resonant sound rang out from every member of the Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Corps. On the specialized Soul Tool armor they wore, the complex array patterns that had long been inscribed were instantly activated, emitting a soft yet firm light. Hundreds of such lights converged and merged in an instant. It wasn't a simple overlap, but a marvelous linked effect produced through some profound Soul Tool array. An incredibly solid, giant oval light shield with a faint flow of 7-colored light appeared like a sturdy eggshell, completely enveloping the entire Sun Moon Royal Soul Engineer Corps. On the surface of the shield, energy flowed like water ripples, emitting a powerful aura as stable as a mountain, isolating everything. Clang! The Scythe Emperor's terrifying scythe strike, capable of cutting through mountains and tearing space, hacked fiercely into this seemingly thin 7-colored light shield. The expected scene of the shield shattering and the legion collapsing did not occur. Instead, there was a deafening roar, like the clash of divine iron. The point of impact erupted with blinding light and violent energy ripples, causing space to distort and vibrate. But that 7-colored light shield only rippled violently, its light dimming slightly, yet it still stood stubbornly and completely in place, steadily blocking the Scythe Emperor's certain kill strike. The Scythe Emperor's 5-meter-tall, lithe body stalled slightly in the air due to this massive countershock. For the first time, the soul fire in its skeletal eye sockets flared with a violent flicker called unbelief. It could clearly feel that its strike just now had indeed landed solidly on the target, and indeed contained demigod-level power, but it was actually blocked. Blocked by a group of humans it regarded as ants, working together with some strange device. This sudden turn of events not only shook the Scythe Emperor's mind, but also caused the Abyssal Saint Lord, who had been closely watching the battle below from high above, to suddenly contract his pupils as his expression became even more somber. That's it for today's chapter. If you enjoyed it, like, comment, and subscribe to AI Otaku Studio for more stories. Check out my other channel, Infinite Novel Audio, and I'll see you in the next chapter.